Councilmember Koretz is going to try to get here as soon as he can. But if he leaves, that quorum breaks. So he's kind of stuck there. Councilmember Bissar won't be in committee today, will not be. So I'll be going through the agenda. I'm going to move as many items as I can that are policy oriented and move on the consent items. The items that require public hearing, public comment, and deliberation, I'm going to try to hold those last to give Councilmember Koretz the chance to get here. If he doesn't, I could waive him out of committee today and just send it as a report from the chair for one basic reason. Because there is no quorum in Plum, you will have another opportunity to speak to the whole council. Not just the committee, but the whole council, which means it's like another hearing. And therefore, our going over the hearing today would be duplicative. So to avoid being redundant, I'll ask you if you want to speak, and you will have a chance to speak before the full council when it's scheduled in the city council. So we'll take it one step at a time. I just threw a lot of stuff at you. But when we come to those items, I'll ask you, one, out of respect of the fact that you took the time to come here, you actually found parking, actually found your way to this room, and waited this long. I would not want to take away the opportunity to speak. It just means you have to repeat everything over again in City Council if Councilman Koretz does not make it. Okay, here we go. First, I'd like to welcome, I hope she's still here, Miss Karen. Miss Karen, welcome. Karen Nagao, correct?
Hello, Councilmember.
Hi, how are you? Well, you've already demonstrated a great characteristic as a potential commissioner with your patience. But I want to thank you for your citizenry and donating your time to the East Los Angeles Area Planning Commission. Can you just give a little bit about yourself so that I'll know what to ask you when you go before the full council?
Yes. Hello, Councilmember. My name is Kay Nagao, and I currently work at Little Tokyo Service Center Community Development Corporation. I manage affordable housing programs, projects in the city of Los Angeles. I also participate in community planning in Little Tokyo. I've served on several boards, such as the California Planning Foundation, as well as our local neighborhood council, the Historic Cultural Neighborhood Council. I've been part of the Little Tokyo Service Center for 4 years. Prior to that, I was doing community organizing, and my office was actually located in Council Member Huizar's office area.
So obviously you are very familiar with the communities in the area that East LA Area Commission encompasses. Was that housing project is that the one on Edgeware?
That is the project on Edgeware and on Glendale Boulevard.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. You triggered that memory. Okay. That's what, 12 years ago?
It was a couple years ago.
More or less. Well, I want to thank you again. And Barbara, when will Ms. Nagao be in front of the council? What day is that scheduled for? Do you know?
Scheduled for Tuesday, August the 11th.
The 11th?
Yes.
Okay. So I will recommend your approval, and I will ask you to speak again in front of the council.
Okay.
I think the city ethics forms are one of the details we have to take care of.
Yes.
So I'm sure that's already been taken care of.
Yes.
And so I want to thank you again, and we'll be recommending for your approval.
Thank you, Councilmember Ayers.
Okay, you have a great day. Thank you very much. Okay, are there any other appointments? No? Okay. Number 2, I'll hold off. I'm hoping that Councilman Koretz shows up. And here he is. Welcome, sir. I was about to start tap dancing when you got here. Well, did they finish or did we give it to leave? Announcements. Okay, great. So we took care of the business. Welcome, Councilmember Koretz. We just reviewed Ms. Nagao for the East Los Angeles Area Planning Commission, and I'll be recommending approval. She has a strong history working in the local area, understands the neighborhoods, and works with several nonprofits, and actually does urban infill housing, and I think she'll be a great candidate. Our next item is going to be item number 2, and there's several cards on that one. Roberto, want to speak to item 2, please?
Council members, what's before you is a motion by Councilman Koretz and seconded by yourself, Councilman Reyes. It's requesting that the council look into the issue of the Century Plaza Hotel as a historic cultural monument.
Okay. Do I have a staff report on this? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ken Bernstein with the Office of Historic Resources. This motion will have the effect of initiating the historic cultural monument designation for the Century Plaza Hotel, and the request would begin the Cultural Heritage Commission's process. Upon approval by the City Council formally initiating the designation, this will be referred to the Cultural Heritage Commission and the Office of Historic Resources. The Commission would be reviewing the designation and acting within 75 days and forwarding a recommendation back to the Plum Committee and City Council.
Okay. Any questions for Councilman Koretz? No questions? Okay. Seeing none, we do have several cards on this item. We have Marilyn Cohen. We have David Kirsch, Barbara Boyd. So Marilyn Cohen, David Kirsch, and Barbara Boyd.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Marilyn Cohen, and I'm Vice President of the Westwood South of Santa Monica Homeowners Association. And with all due respect, we are urging you to support the motion before your committee providing social and cultural landmark status for the Century Plaza Hotel. The building is a notable example of the work of celebrated architect Minoru Yamasaki and is one of his most important designs. The elegant, curved design was a cornerstone of the development of Century City and should remain as a graceful counterpoint to the proliferation of towers which are being developed there. It has both architectural and historical significance and should be preserved in this city which has rarely honored that legacy. On a personal note, having grown up in Detroit, Michigan with its bleak and uninspired architectural landscape, the arrival of Minoru Yamasaki brought fresh and elegant design to the city. He left a legacy there incorporating elements of exquisite international architectural style. A half-century later, they are still exciting and adventurous. The other relevant note is a plea based upon a sad event in the history of Los Angeles, which is etched in my memory. The Dodge House on Kings Road, designed by celebrated architect Irving Gill, was built in 1914. The American Institute of Architects ranked it among the 15 most architecturally significant American houses. Architects from all over the world came to see this site-specific home, an early example of the modernist architectural style. Despite efforts of architecture preservationists, one rainy night in 1970, the building was demolished with no advance notice. The bulldozing of the Dodge House has been called one of the most shameful chapters in LA's legacy of self-destruction, and the New York Times called it a tragic commentary on how we throw our national heritage away. We hope that the city of Los Angeles has matured in its appreciation of our cultural legacy. Please help us preserve one of the major buildings in our midst. And I have here 26 additional letters in support of this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, David Kirsch. I'm here on behalf of the Contractors Cooperation Committee. We represent 65,000 members in the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters, as well as the signatory contractors. I'm here because we have some serious concerns about the proposal before you. Really believe that it will impact the ability to develop a project there. I think it's no mystery right now that we're in very tough economic times, and the possibility of having a major construction project there that will create employment opportunities for many of our citizens is something that we do not want to pass up. At the same time, if you're looking at creating what I believe will be an environmental friendly building with more space in order to truly realize Century City's potential as a sort of a smart growth, as smart living, I think we'd be passing up on that opportunity. So again, we have some concerns. We need the jobs, and we need to look at the future. We have a lot of people that are out of work, and the job is going to help a lot of people. And so, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, council members. Thank you. My name is Barbara Brady. I represent Westwood South of Santa Monica Boulevard Homeowners Association and our 3,800 households that belong. I'm here to speak on behalf of the motion. It is time to pass a protection now. We can't wait. We've lost too many landmarks in our city. This is a cultural landmark. It is an icon in our community, and it is also a magnet for business because I, in my professional capacities, booked a number of national conferences at the Century Plaza, and frankly, those conferences would not have come downtown whether there was an LA Live or a Bonaventure or any other facilities. They wanted to be on the west side. The hotel provides many jobs for the employees there. Likewise, we've had many, many fundraising dinners, benefits, state dinners, at this hotel, and that is a much-needed facility on the west side. It is part of the core of Century City. It's part of the original development, and there is every reason to build around it, to work with landscape architecture, with planning, to make it what it is, a significant icon, and do what needs to be done and review with the community all the alternatives for developing around within Century City. So we support our councilman's motion, and we thank him for bringing it on behalf of the community, and we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. We have Mike Bueller, Scott Diamond, John Rickman. Mike Bueller, Scott Diamond, and John Rickman. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Mike Bueller, Director of Advocacy with the Los Angeles Conservancy. First of all, we would like to applaud Councilmember Koretz for his leadership to ensure that the historic significance of the Century Plaza Hotel is fully recognized. I'd like to clarify that I'm not here today to argue the relative merits of the proposed project, as the site's eligibility for historic designation is an independent issue from that. As noted in the motion, the Century Plaza Hotel is exceptionally significant not only for its architecture, but as a cultural touchstone for the city of Los Angeles. In April 2009, the National Trust for Historic Preservation included the Century Plaza Hotel on its annual list of America's 11 most endangered historic places. This is an extremely competitive process with hundreds of applications submitted from around the country for that recognition. Since that listing, there has been overwhelming response, both locally and really from around the world, in support of preservation of the hotel. Over 1,200 people have expressed their support for preservation by taking the pledge to support preservation on our website. These people come from 29 different states across the country, 9 different countries around the world. And locally, to date, 5 homeowners associations in and around Century City have expressed their support for preservation, having joined the coalition in support of preservation of the hotel. HCM designation, in our view, is essential to ensure that preservation alternatives are adequately and fairly considered as part of the EIR process, and also to provide the city with a meaningful role in shaping how this proposed project evolves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott Diamond and John Rickman.
Thank you, council members. My name is Scott Diamond. I represent the 1,355 homes of the Beverlywood Homes Association. I'm the president of the association. I am here today representing those homes in support of Councilmember Koretz's motion. We as well appreciate his bringing this forth. I agree with the previous comments that I think it's essential to get this moving today so that we can move forward when the EIR does come out, so all the considerations are properly documented relative to the historical significance of the building. I spent 18 years on a personal note working in Century City. The Century Plaza has always been the centerpiece of that area. In fact, I also got married there, so it has a nice piece for myself. Thank you for your time, and Beverlywood would like to support the motion.
Thank you, sir. John Reckman? Mark Armbruster.
My name is Jan Reichman. I'm president of the Comstock Hills Homeowners Association. And let the record show that our Homeowners Association strongly supports the Koretz motion urging landmark status and preservation of the Century Plaza Hotel. Not only is it a design of significant example of fluid modernist style of the 1960s, but few such structures remain in Los Angeles. Architect Yamasaki's architecture is praiseworthy, and to remove this fine representation is short-sighted and tragic. No amount of economic reasoning should prevail when dealing with the very character of this city's environment and historic past. Not only has it been a presidential setting, but a place where political activism thrived during the tumultuous 60s. Century City developers already have entitlements to build 4 skyscraping towers. The proposal to add 2 more that reach 49 stories and 570 feet is simply poor planning, where the cumulative effect will further choke the west side. I also have a brief note here from Sandy Brown, who's president of Homeby Westwood. On behalf of the 1,100 single-family homes in Homeby Westwood, I congratulate Councilmember Paul Koretz on his motion to nominate the Century Plaza Hotel for Historic Cultural Monument designation. The association strongly supports the motion and the designation. Sandy Brown.
Okay, thank you very much. Mark Armbruster, Johnny Parker, and then Michael Rosenfeld.
Thank you. Mark Armbruster with Armbruster, Goldsmith, Smith and Delvec. We represent Next Century Associates, the owner of the hotel. And we're here really just to ask you to consider not moving forward so quickly, since there, in fact, is absolutely no need to move forward so quickly. There is absolutely no danger whatsoever I forgot to turn off my phone, I apologize. There's no danger whatsoever to the hotel being demolished or in fact closed, since the owner has committed not to do so and not to close the hotel. Furthermore, the CEQA analysis, the environmental impact report, is just now commencing, and I think it's important that the city have before it all possible information before moving forward and making such a momentous decision. This project, the proposed project as designed, has huge economic benefits for the city. It's a project of citywide importance in terms of the jobs that it will create, the revenue that it will create for the city, which is even more important in today's economic times. And again, you ultimately may or may not agree with that, but we're just saying take some more time to think about it, balance those issues, and understand the project fully before going forward. Furthermore, and finally, let me say that the environmental impact report, we're committed that the EIR will fully analyze the historic resources or potential historic resources, and will also fully analyze any preservation alternatives. Additionally, we're committed to working with the community and the Conservancy on those things. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I am Joni Parker, West Side resident. There are many kinds of tragedy in our lives. Surely it is a tragedy to lose our past, to deprive ourselves of our cultural heritage as Americans. Fortunately, Councilman Paul Koretz realizes that. The lovely, graceful Century Plaza Hotel must be saved. This architecturally beautiful hotel is indisputably a significant part of Los Angeles history and a cherished part. It is not an abomination to be torn down, but a treasure to be protected. How many American buildings have made the cover of Time magazine? It is unthinkable that we could destroy the Century Plaza Hotel and replace it with monster towers that will contribute to the overdevelopment and further degradation of our beloved city. Please grant the Century Plaza Hotel historical landmark status so that we may continue to enjoy this lovely part of our all too brief cultural history. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our last speaker, Michael Rosenfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Koretz. I would just like to touch on the fact that I do think it's important that there is a full analysis of the cultural significance of this property, as well as an analysis of all other relevant potential impacts, opportunities, and benefits that may come as a result of the proposed application. And I would like to thank Councilmember Koretz for his efforts to promote a community involved process in working with both the Conservancy and the community groups in getting their involvement and input in this process. And we would only respectfully request that any proposed advancement of the issue of historic preservation is analyzed in the context of all other impacts, opportunities, both economic, planning, and social, relating to this property, so that both this committee as well as the council as a whole is given the opportunity to analyze this project with all of available information at their disposal to make decisions. We think that the best planning process is one that's a fully informative process where all information is available so that we can understand what options and opportunities may present themselves. Again, I greatly appreciate your efforts and the energy that you put into this process. Thank you.
Let me ask you this question. The previous representative mentioned that they wanted to see if they can fold in the current request to have this historic review as part of the full EIR. Is that what you're recommending?
Yes, sir. That we believe that in incorporating the historic analysis in the environmental impact report, it would give both this committee and the council the full benefit of analyzing all of the impacts and opportunities of the project as a whole, and would not preclude opportunities that may incorporate preservation or other economic, planning, or social benefits that may come as a result of this. And ultimately the council will make the decision that they feel is based upon all of those facts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions from?
Not a question. I was just going to make the point that
please.
In my motion, I intend to request that anyway, that the EIR consider various preservation alternatives. Among them would be further development on the site without demolishing the building. I don't know that that can't be done without going. It can be done through the historic preservation process. I don't think that it would make any of that any more difficult. It would make it more difficult to demolish the property and build 250-story towers as is proposed, and I don't decline to admit publicly I want to make that more difficult. We looked at whether we could feel as confident that could be done and the building would be preserved without going through the historic preservation process. And ultimately, I and my staff decided that we were not as confident that that would work out. And my primary goal is to preserve this building without eliminating options to make that property more profitable to the owner.
Okay. Okay. Madam Attorney?
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. They're really two separate issues. One is a proposed project, but the initiation for monument designation is under the Administrative Code 22-171 at SEC. And so that's what this process is about. If this this committee recommends to council to initiate, then it goes to Cultural Heritage, and Cultural Heritage Commission has a set of criteria that they use to determine whether the hotel warrants monument designation after they do the investigation. So they're kind of two different tracks.
And with all due respect to the council member of the district, Councilmember Koretz, I just needed to understand and get some clarity as to, I mean, it was suggested in public comment that they wanted to fold one or the other, and I don't know if technically that's possible, whether it's even desired, but you made it clear that they are distinct tracks, but they're both sort of legal requirements with their own conditions, and you can't.
Right. The environmental analysis will address the potential historic significance as well, and that'll be one track. But this is something that is pursuant to the administrative code.
I see.
So it's just separate from the project.
Okay, I just wanted some clarity on that. Thank you. Councilman Koretz?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
This is a four-part motion. First, I'd like to direct staff to prepare historic nomination application for the Century Plaza Hotel. Second, I'd like to direct staff to provide an inventory list to call out all defining structures and features that may be historic and those features which would not qualify as historic or culturally significant prior to the initiation motion proceeding to council. And that's dealing with the entire property. Third, I'd like to direct the City of Los Angeles as the lead agency to require that the EIR treat the hotel structure as a historic resource for purposes of environmental analysis. And lastly, I'd like to request the applicant to participate in a design charrette/community outreach process in consultation with the LA Conservancy, Office of Historic Resources, Neighborhood Council, and community stakeholders to design and propose several viable preservation alternative plans. At least 3 of these alternative plans should be studied as project alternatives in the draft environmental impact report document.
Okay, I'll second that. So there'll be a directive to the staff, the motion, and Madam Attorney, does this move forward to the council, or does this go back to the staff?
Yeah, it is required to go to the council if it's an initiation, but I also, as long as you're going to interpret, I'd like to know if there's a deadline for the initiation to go forward.
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. The deadline will commence when council acts, or the clock will start running after council acts to initiate. And then that sets into play a series of things that have to be done within a certain period of time. So the deadline doesn't run from the committee action.
That's correct. Again, Ken Bernstein, the clock would start upon the date of council initiation, and then the commission would have 75 days from that point. Under the Cultural Heritage Ordinance, the Office of Historic Resources staff must make a recommendation to the commission, and the commission act on that recommendation within 75 days from the date of initiation.
So the motion as defined by the council member is a detailed instruction to the council, right, and to the department, and this all moves forward to the council, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I just was looking at the agenda item relates to the monument designation, and so I'm just a little concerned about the EIR component to the motion, which is related to the project, which is not
part of this.
Part of this.
Can we separate it out? Can we separate and say, let's just stick with what was published as our action today, and the rest could be a directive?
Well, because it's not on the agenda.
On the agenda, oh, okay. Well, so what can we move forward? That way, Councilman Corretz.
On the motion, which is, as I'm reading the agenda, it just relates to monument designation and whether or not the council wants to initiate that process.
So could you introduce what he just did as a motion to be reviewed by committee later?
I guess so. I mean, it's not on the agenda, but I suppose it could be put on the agenda.
That way it's publicly announced and we meet all the Brown Act issues.
Yeah, if it's a problem, I can bring back the items that are not appropriately noticed, as you say, and bring them back at our next meeting.
Yeah, it's not that it's just how to accomplish it. And today, what's on the agenda is the initiation. So the other items should be brought back and then can be done in a way to give direction to staff and so forth.
If I may humbly suggest, Councilman, let's move forward with the initial act that was publicized. And you can come back with a motion, and we can make that part of your action and take that up at the next board meeting, and we can move that forward.
So that would be the third and fourth item that I suggested. Correct. Okay.
Are you comfortable with that?
That's fine.
Okay.
And we will accept the second item as just part of the directive to staff in preparing the recommendation to the Cultural Heritage Commission. So
that, are you okay with that, Councilman Kurtz? Okay, so that'll be our action. We'll move on the motion as described by the city attorney on the initiation, and I will anticipate the directives as defined by Councilman Kurtz to come forward to this committee as a motion. So that'll be the action of this committee.
May I clarify on behalf of the owner? I represent Next Century, as well as Mark Armbruster. What we're trying to clarify is what the action is here today. What we understood the intention to be is that prior to moving forward on initiation, that these things would be brought back to the committee. In our view, you could hold the matter on the desk till they're brought back, or you could, in fact, make this part of the motion. It seems to me under the Brown Act that the question of what the initiation is, that this speaks to that. So, in our view, we believe that the motion, in fact, is properly on the agenda because it relates to the manner in which the council would be initiating.
Sorry, Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. My understanding of, Councilman, of your requests 3 and 4, that those related to the EIR for the project. Am I correct? For
yes.
a proposed project. Okay, and that is separate from initiation.
Yeah, we had heard that said to do those things prior to the initiation of what I had heard the motion to be.
Okay, and my advice is that because that proposed project is not on the agenda, that it's not proper to be part of a motion. It would be up to the committee if they want to continue and add something and agendize it properly. That's something else.
You can't initiate. Yeah, it was our understanding that the goal was that the initiation would relate to the idea of what should be initiated, that the character-defining features would all be identified so that the initiation related to that. So we believe it's all part of the same agenda.
I think that's number 2 of his motion. Number 2 of the motion was for staff to evaluate the character-defining features. Correct?
Yes, that's what I'd like the motion to be.
So that will occur before the full council takes the initiation up.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. So we clear what we're doing here? All right. So that's the action of this committee. And this will move forward to council, and we'll get all the necessary reports and feedback based on the motion that will be anticipated from Councilman Kurtz. Okay. Well, let's just go through the agenda really quick and review the consent items. I'll identify which items are special based on the fact that we have public hearing cards. Number 3, there are no public hearing cards, and on 3, we can request the city attorney to present the ordinance. Number 4, we'll call special, given cards that are submitted. 5, we can move on consent. 6, we do have cards on 6. We have cards on 7. Number 8, we don't have any cards, and we can approve the CEO recommendation to replace the construction service center server room air conditioning system at Plaza in the amount of $132,091 from the Construction Services Trust Fund. And can approve the Department of Building Safety's report. Number 9, there are no speaker cards on 9. We can grant the hardship exemption request based on the committee's evaluation. 10 is special, 11 is special, and 12 is special. We have cards on all those items. Can I have a second on those, Councilor Kurtz?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. What I'd like to do is, out of courtesy to my colleagues, we do have Councilmember Parks here, and I know he's pretty busy as well, and perhaps we can move on that item. That's item number 7. Rebecca, can you give us item 7, please?
Yes, Councilman, it's a report from the Cultural Heritage Commission. It's recommending inclusion of the Second Church of Christ Scientist Reading Room and Library as a historic cultural monument.
Yes, good afternoon, committee members. Lambert Giesinger with the Planning Department. The recommendation before you is to declare the property an historic monument based on the Cultural Heritage Commission findings that the building embodies the distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type as an example of Georgian revival style architecture, and secondarily that the property reflects the broad cultural, economic, and social history of the community for its association with the Second Church of Christ Scientist Sanctuary and building, which is adjacent to the subject property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we go to public comment to cards, I'd like to ask Councilman Parks to make his presentation. I want to thank you for your letter. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable members. I just wanted to stop by because often we do not disagree with the Cultural Heritage Commission, but in this case, having taken a personal interest in going out and looking at the site, I think it's an overreach to declare this as a monument. If you go and look at the issue of the church, and we have to admit it's probably one of the more grand facilities in the 8th District, but then when you look at the reading room, which was a books depository since 1940, you'll see that it is nothing descriptive about it, nor does it in any way identify any particular architect or a design or an era. I think what we also need to realize is that at one time prior to 1940, in the church itself was the reading room and counter for sales of books, which is still there. If you go into the church in the sanctuary, you'll find the counter for the sales. This was merely built, this building was built for a overflow. But I think in my letter, the 2 things or 3 things I think are most important to me is that when there was an opportunity to declare this as a historical site or a monument in 1968 and also in 1986, in both instances, it was left off of the consideration as a registry. And then when this proposal was made, the Cultural Heritage Commission made a decision not to connect it to the church itself, which in my judgment really clearly distinguishes it from not only the cultural part, but also the impact on the community. It's the church that's really the main issue here, and it is certainly secured by its designation. But clearly, when you look at the building that accompanies it, that's on another plot of land that was initially built and part of their parking lot, you get a completely different perspective. I think if you see that when the experts come up and show you the photos to make a comparative analysis, to see the overview of the community, I think you'll come to the same conclusion that I have, having walked through both facilities, looked at the architecture, looked at the design, looked at all of the variety of issues that I think the Cultural Heritage Commission normally looks at. But I think also we need to look at that when they finally made the determination of a monument, they used probably the least restrictive guidelines that are available, not something in which it was the more specific as it relates to that particular building. So that's just something that we wanted to prepare in a letter. I wanted to stop by and make my personal comments and then leave it to the experts to talk to you about those issues. But I think what's relevant to me was to see the drastic and stark comparison of the two buildings and clearly understand, having walked through the church, that that is really the significant facility in the community.
Thank you, Councilor Parks. Thank you for your diligence on this and your presentation. Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to have several members of the audience who submitted cards. And let's start off with Anna Marie Brooks. And then we have Laura, I believe it's Miders. Good afternoon, ma'am. Hi there.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Anna Marie Brooks, I'm here representing the owners. I think that the applicants said it very well when they said the building most resembled a tract home of the period, which they pointed out on the same page of a newspaper article, the only article ever to carry a photo or an article about this building. And I totally agree with the council person. And in closing, I would say when I talk to leaders of the former church, it's now been sold. The buildings are deaccession church buildings. They are no longer church buildings. They said two things. One, they no longer care about them. When they sell a building, it's a done deal. The question for them is what happens with the money in terms of the faith. And the advice they gave us was to do something constructive with the buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Myers?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'm actually the applicant on behalf of West Adams Heritage Association.
okay.
So I guess I'm now responding, but I am the applicant. And I have a little story to tell. I have sat on the Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Committee for this project area for 20 years. This is historic already. It has been designated by CRA since 1985 on its own and because of its historical associations with Second Church of Christ scientists. We all assumed, I mean everyone in West Adams and planning staff, that when Cultural Affairs hired the consultant 15 years ago to revise the all of the monuments in the city, the records, to make sure that all the alternative addresses were included, everyone assumed the reading room was brought in at that time. No one looked at the file until the current owner, who bought it a couple years ago, decided to sell the property and advertised it as vacant land. And a potential buyer came to CRA to propose a demolition and a big construction project, and it's like, wait a minute, it's a historic monument, it's on the historic list for CRA. Planning staff asked me to write a technical correction for the file. Then it became, can you please do a presentation to the commission? Sure, fine, I'll do a PowerPoint. Then it became, you better write up the entire nomination. Fine, I'll do that, but we'll amend Second Church of Christ Scientists, the church sanctuary. And by the time we turned it in, because the consultant had been hired, I was asked basically to do a cover memo, which you have in your records, that gave them the choice, either amend or make it a standalone. I do not think the Cultural Heritage Commission took its mission lightly. They read 50 pages of a consultant's report. We hired a consultant. The reading room turns out to be, and I did not know anything about Christian Science, it is the place where the religion is practiced, more than the sanctuary. The sanctuaries were built because 100 years ago Christian Science was deemed a cult, and so they embarked on a building program across America to build these beautiful, imposing churches with interiors like this room. But the religion is important in the reading room. In 1941, when they built the reading room, It was purposely on Hoover. It was purposely kept residential in scale and massing, not a tract home. It's the same scale and massing as the other properties. The commission recognized this and opted to make it a standalone monument rather than amending, and I'm very concerned when that is misunderstood. And I'm a little upset because I was working with CD8 to do this in the beginning. It's just the council deputies have changed. So
Okay, but we heard from the council member as well.
I do know that.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Council member, could I?
Yes, please.
Ask a question? I'm somewhat of in a quandary. I tend to be a preservationist, but I think there are some somewhat compelling arguments in the other direction. Let me ask you the question. The argument is that the reading room was an add-on, that there already is a present reading room. It was an overflow reading room. The architecture isn't particularly remarkable. Right. So as the property owner attempts to engage in some reuse, which would be presumably to find another church to take it over, any church but another church of Christian Science wouldn't need a second overflow reading room. So as a practical matter, it doesn't help, and it doesn't match the architecture and the history of the primary building. So why would we consider this somewhat unremarkable appearing annex for additional preservation?
And I understand the question. It's not an annex. I mean, the key thing that I did not understand, and had to read our consultant's report, and then I listened as well again last night to the tape at the Cultural Heritage Commission, where Christy McElvoy came in and testified. She was not the consultant we had hired, but she is a consultant who did the initial work 20 years ago. A reading room is the place where this religion is practiced. A building where congregants gather is not the main tenet or precepts of the religion, was her point. That this is a religion that is about literacy. So reading room is not an annex. When they chose to build a reading room on Hoover, it's when the city was transitioning from a pedestrian-oriented society to a car society, and Hoover at that point was being widened to 100 feet wide, and it was the direct access from, I want to say, Silver Lake, Echo Park, that area, to USC, so it was on purpose. The building is prosaic. I mean, it'd be like comparing this gorgeous room that we're in to the old Plaza Church, HCM number 3, a very prosaic building. It's a monument because of its historic associations, not just that it's old. We didn't nominate this based on its architecture. We will recognize that the architecture in the Georgian Revival matches the precepts of Christian Science, as it turns out, but that wasn't the basis. The basis was the historic associations. So I don't know that I'm answering it, but it seems silly to stand in front of you asking for an HCM and then say the building is not the most important concept to think about. But in reality, we don't have a landmarks ordinance. We have a historic cultural monument ordinance.
Okay. Okay. Mitzi M. Mogul. And then we'll have Nathan Ung. Is Mitzi Mogul here? Okay. Then we have our next. Oh, she's coming. Okay. Good afternoon, ma'am.
My apologies. I was speaking with the councilman out in the hallway. Just give me 1 second. Mitzi March-Mogul, Historic Preservation Consultant for West Adams Heritage Association. I want to address so many things for you.
Just keep an eye on the clock.
Yes. I want to address the comparison, first of all, that was made in the council letter to other houses and structures in the area. He references the Victorian and Craftsman houses. But by that definition, it's an unfair threshold, because by that definition, it would say that any infill construction in any historic district would be immediately disqualified on the very face of it, because it wasn't there when the neighborhood first began. And by comparing it to the church, again, we make an unfair compare and contrast, an unfair threshold. It would be like comparing this room, which definitely has the wow factor when people walk in, to my house, for instance. It's a nice house. It's quite a good house, but it doesn't have quite this same wow factor. If we look at the Plaza Church, HCM number 3, as churches go and as mission churches go, it's really rather prosaic. There are much better churches representing that period of history even. Here we're taking something out of its proper period of history, out of its context, and comparing it to something entirely different. The fact that we don't say that it's pretty, just 1 second more,
Can you finish, please?
Sometimes history is downright ugly, but it's who we are. There are important cultural and ethnic associations that may not necessarily fit conventional notions of pretty, but we have to look deeper to find the beauty in their deeper meaning. And I could give you any number of other examples.
Thank you, ma'am.
That would help you.
Can you submit what you have in writing? We can review it.
I would be happy to.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our last speaker is Nathan.
Good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of the ownership. I represent the ownership, and I just want to clarify a couple items before you. One of the items that was mentioned by one of the applicants.
Would you mind speaking into the microphone? We can hear you better.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Is this a little better?
Yes.
I just want to clarify a couple items that was mentioned by the applicant. One of it was an application for development of a project there. Currently, right now, there are no plans for development because of the economic condition. The owner would like to improve the property and create value for the property for all stakeholders involved, but right now, we do not have any plans for development for the property. The other item I would like to clarify is from my previous experience in doing redevelopment and doing historical preservation work in Pasadena, I've learned a little bit about preservation. And reviewing this property, walking this property, I don't see any major architectural or cultural heritage value associated with this property that's worth salvaging. The architecture is not significant. It's not integrated. The design's not significant. It's a hodgepodge design that's put together. In looking at it and comparing to the church, we don't see how this could be considered a historical monument. And in conclusion, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer anything.
Okay. All right. Any questions, Councilman, from the staff, anything? Okay. A motion? Have any thoughts? What do you want to do?
I don't know. It's a hard call. I mean, it really doesn't sound like the argument for preservation is compelling enough to move forward with it. So I guess I would move to deny the application to historically preserve the building.
Yeah, and looking at the history and seeing the council members' efforts, he actually went down there, he looked at the site, he made his evaluation, and I would tend to agree with his position at this time, given the lack of connectivity when it comes to the architecture and issue of significance. So I would second that motion as well. So we would deny the application to be considered on the list of historic cultural monuments. Okay, next item, Roberto.
It would be item 4, council members. It's a draft ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to specify that live-work units are primarily residential with accessory commercial uses.
Okay, can I have the staff on this, please?
Good afternoon, members of the committee, Alan Bell, Planning Department staff. The proposed ordinance before you today amends the 1999 Adaptive Reuse Ordinance. This particular ordinance provides incentives to convert existing commercial and industrial buildings into live-work units. Live-work units are hybrid units that allow both a commercial and a residential use in the same space. This particular ordinance, adopted over 10 years ago, has been an unqualified success, creating over 14,000 live-work units citywide, including numerous for-sale live-work units. It has been the driving force behind downtown's revitalization. The 1999 Adaptive Reuse Ordinance defined live-work units as having primarily a commercial space, meaning that 2/3 of a live-work unit must be commercial and no more than 1/3 must be residential. The ordinance before you today essentially reverses that ratio, defining them as primarily residential with an accessory commercial use. Specifically, the ordinance says that at least 10%, but no more than 25% of the space within a live-work unit must be commercial. If a project developer wishes to exceed that 25% cap on commercial space, they could file for an adjustment to increase it. Why do this at this particular time? When the ordinance was initially adopted, the definition of live-work units caused some confusion as to which standards, commercial or residential, would apply. Over time, the city's policy was to treat these units as residential units for purposes of enforcing the city's building and zoning code, specifically parking, fire and life safety standards, setbacks, density, open space, and so on. So the ordinance before you merely makes the city's definition of live-work units consistent with the city's practice for enforcing them for purposes of building and zoning codes. The ordinance has a very significant benefit in terms of the city's housing recovery. What it will do, in addition to making it consistent with our city's building and zoning codes, is it will enable the buyer of a live-work unit to obtain an FHA-insured mortgage. The FHA insurance program is one of the foundations of the nation's housing market, enabling buyers to qualify for lower interest loans with lower down payments. However, due to the city's adaptive reuse ordinance, buyers of live-work units in Los Angeles cannot obtain an FHA-insured mortgage because of FHA's rules that they will not insure against a property that includes more than 25% commercial space. FHA's decision to not insure mortgages to live-work units in the city of Los Angeles has stalled the city's housing recovery, especially in downtown. City staff and members of the business community have been working with FHA over the past several months to try to resolve this issue, but with little success. The most appropriate resolution, since it is in fact consistent with how we treat residential units, live-work units, is to amend the city's adaptive reuse ordinance. Now, the ordinance that the Planning Commission adopted did not include some additional amendments to the building code, which we have worked on with the Department of Building and Safety, and those specifically have to do with the alternative building standards that are a companion piece to the live-work ordinance. These standards are currently inconsistent with the with the Los Angeles Building Code, so we would want to take, at this point in time, the opportunity to make the alternative building standards for live-work units consistent with the Los Angeles Building Code in two areas, in light and in ventilation, and we do have a representative from the Department of Building and Safety who can speak to this further. The department has endorsed modifying the proposed ordinance along these lines. So that concludes staff presentation. If there are any questions, I can answer them.
I have a couple of questions, but Councilman, do you have any questions for him? I'm just reviewing some notes and observations from different parties that would be impacted by this change. And one of the concerns is the flexibility. Let's assume, and I'll give you a case example. Let's assume there's an artist
Right.
who has a lot of material, maybe even scaffolding, maybe, giant, whatever. I mean, all the materials they can use. There's a whole range of artists working with different materials. And let's say they do need 50%, 45%, 65%, and they actually are using their live workspace the way the code has defined it. Let's say that does exist. By changing what you're recommending right now, do we still have the flexibility? Can one be able to trigger the FHA consideration if they need it or want it? And what if those who are in the area don't really want to go down that road and use FHA or have that connectivity to that financial advantage in terms of a program? I mean, are we indirectly undercutting or maybe not allowing those who use it in that way? Did we give them time to respond to this change?
We did certainly consult with members of the arts community, and we did have several conversations. And I think the ordinance before you certainly addresses that concern. The city's artists and residents ordinance is a discretionary process anyway, and specifically I'm referring to allowing artists and residence units within the city's commercial zones, and it requires an application and a hearing before a zoning administrator. The way this particular ordinance is structured, at the same time that an artist is applying for one of these units, they could also apply for an adjustment to increase the percentage of working space. So there would be no additional burden under that particular scenario. Now, of course, those units would have to be rental units, or they would certainly forego the opportunity to qualify them for FHA-insured mortgage. But again, this adjustment process would be available not only for artists, but for any particular developer that wanted to exceed the 25% threshold. And then, because it is a discretionary process, we could take into consideration the impact of that particular increased commercial working space would have on the surrounding community, whether it would be compatible with the existing neighborhood, and impose appropriate mitigation measures. What we have found is that in practice, these units are primarily used in 99.9% of all cases as primarily residential spaces, and that's why we subject them merely to the residential standards, particularly parking, open space, and setbacks, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so you feel confident that the level of outreach that was achieved in putting this together gives us the confidence to know that this change in the code will accommodate and benefit the greater community?
We did not do an extensive outreach. We did not have, for example, community-based meetings, but we intentionally designed the ordinance to be able to take advantage of the fact that we already have an existing discretionary process required for artists and residents, and this merely adds an additional entitlement that they would have to be requesting anyway in order to get approved. So there's no additional burden because
so
we have to file
boxing
anyway.
them in. We're not eliminating. We're not taking away from their ability to want to.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're not doing that. Okay. All right, I'll be calling up the speakers and just stick around.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have with us Shiraz Tangri. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing your name. I'm trying to make out the letters here.
Perfect.
And Stephen Appleton. Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. Shiraz Tangri for the downtown law firm of Alston Bird. First, I want to thank the planning department for their quick action and responsiveness on this issue. Given their incredible workload and the budget issues, I think the way they responded to this issue that's very important to the development community really deserves some special commendation. The second point I wanted to address, Mr. Bell mentioned downtown issues and the adaptive reuse ordinance, but live-work issues are really not limited to downtown in any means. I think there's a perception that this issue is a downtown luxury condo issue, and that's really not the case. There's a 2006 study that found that close to 50% of all U.S.-based businesses are to some degree home-based, and that number is expected to rise over time and especially accelerate given the current economic climate as jobs start to come back. There are live-work units in West LA, in Hollywood, the Harbor area, and the East Side. There are live-work units at various price points, including workforce, what we think of as workforce rates. And the perception that these units are limited to use by artists or by single people or younger people is also untrue. There are people with families increasingly are finding the need or appreciate the flexibility that live work provides to be able to work from home. So really this ordinance, I think, affects all parts of the city or has the ability to benefit all parts of the city. The last comment I would make is, what the FHA program that's in place here, by making this amendment, what the city is essentially doing is leveraging federal money to encourage economic activity in our city. And given our economic crisis, I think the city really needs to look for these types of creative opportunities to partner with the private sector, and that's going to be our way to get the economic engine going again. So we appreciate the city, and particularly the City Planning Department's responsiveness in partnering up. Thank you.
So bottom line, you support it?
I support it.
Okay. All right, next speaker.
Stephen Appleton. I'm an artist, have worked for City of Los Angeles, County of Los Angeles, the LA Metro, a lot of private projects, including a project at Sunset and Vine that won some national awards. My concern about this matter, the nuances of it are actually quite deep. The question of whether there is, in fact, an additional burden on the development of live-work space that's appropriate to artists, I don't think has been clearly resolved. And my concern does go to the matter of outreach. For instance, I do know that Mr. Bell spoke with Tracy Stone, who's an architect of some note, who I know personally, who informed me of this. He did indicate that he would get back to her to answer some specific questions. That did not happen. And you would think that given the nature of that conversation, which I think was encouraged through CD1, that she would have known about this meeting, but she didn't. And I spoke to her today, and she indicated, please do mention that as well. So there is a constituency of artists. I don't think I have to tell anybody here that the creative economy is a big engine of Los Angeles. The origins of the live-work ordinance was an artisan residency conditional use permit, agreed that there was a discretionary process associated with it. It was very facilitated in order to move certain things forward. I am concerned that additional burdens come with this for the people least likely to be able to take those burdens. That is, artists who are genuinely producing creative work and are a big part of this economy. I urge that you step back from this and do the appropriate outreach and have a fully fleshed out conversation. Look, it's true. Downtown lofts are rotting on the vine, and being able to qualify them for FHA will be a great benefit. These benefits came through a lot of innovation of artists too. Don't forget that. I think you need to take a look at this carefully. That's my encouragement, and I'm speaking for a lot of people who, for instance, I have to say one thing. You would think that Adolfo Nodal would know about this and have an opportunity to give comment on it. He didn't. Did the LA County Arts Commission know about it or give comment? This outreach needs to be done to really flesh this out. Okay. We're all in favor of good economy and getting more fees and doing it right. But
thank you. And what's your son's name? Your son, what's his name?
My son is Giannis, and
Giannis, all right, Giannis.
He's at a lesson in government today.
Well, being as young as he is, he's showing a lot of patience, so thank you, Giannis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. We do have another card, and it says Central City Association, but doesn't have a name.
Sorry, it's been a long day. This is Veronica Perez-Becker from the Central City Association. Good afternoon. Let me start by saying that we're continually impressed by the city's very talented planning staff. They're diligent and open to our input, and we really appreciate you, Alan, Michael, Vince, and Gail. For over a year, CCA has been working with stakeholders on this issue, and we believe the amendment before you will be the most effective solution. FHA loans could provide a critical lifeline to the ailing downtown housing market and an opportunity for home buyers. Unfortunately, up to this point, FHA has been denying these loans to live-work units in downtown. What you have before you is an opportunity to give more Angelenos a chance at home ownership and at the same time stimulating our local economy. As the chief architects of the Adaptive Reuse Ordinance, we at CCA have worked closely with the Planning Department to ensure that the package before you preserves the integrity of our local live-work regulations and has flexibility for increased commercial use in the future. And to address the public comments by the artisan residents, we at CCA also support our artist community here in downtown and in the city, and we have been working closely with the Planning Department. We do believe this package has the flexibility to allow for increased, to keep the old percentages if that's what's desired. So we enthusiastically support this item. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I failed to identify him, and I should have asked him when to go first or last. Greg Fisher, are you still here? Greg, did you want to go last or want to go now, or does it matter?
Since I'm here, I'll go now.
Okay.
Council members, Councilwoman Perry endorses the concept, appreciates planning staff's extensive work in trying to make this work for everyone, realizes that it is an ongoing work in progress. It may not be perfect, but we're getting there. We're very pleased to support the concept. We're very pleased that FHA has taken their time to help us get to a point where we can work with the gap that we have not enjoyed between the state and federal definitions of how live work should be defined. There is not any effort here to be anything but holistic, and there is no attempt, either implied or otherwise, to have this as anything other than a win-win situation for all sides.
Well, let me ask you something before Mr. Appleton leaves, and I want to ask you this question. I did get some emails and some concerns about how fast this went, given what different artists feel could be an imposition given their economic challenges. So, as the council district, would you be how can I phrase this? If we held this 2 weeks to allow for more input, is that something that'll help or hurt? Because actually it'll drag out to a month because of the break. Or do you want to move on this and then deal with changes later? I mean, in the spirit of being inclusive and comprehensive, I did get I just want to be very straightforward as to the emails I did get.
As we are trying to be as inclusive and as difficulty-free as possible, if it's necessary to do that, that we'll have to do, because we're not trying to step on anyone. We're not trying to make anybody's situation uncomfortable. We are trying to reconcile situations that are by definition not working.
No, I strongly believe that the remedy is very clear. If we open the gate for this federal resource to be applied, and what's holding it is a code language, then I can understand the logic behind that. But what it does for those who are already there, who want to stay, I think that's just clarity that needs to occur. And maybe Mr. Bell, if you want to, I see you're anxious to say something. Come on up.
Yes, I want to point out that this doesn't change the ratio for all the existing entitled live-work units within the city of Los Angeles. So all the existing ones can continue to maintain 2/3 of their live-work unit as commercial space. It doesn't change that at all. This would only apply to new developments.
Okay, that's good to know and have on the record. Mr. Kretz, come on, Councilmember.
Essentially, I want to ask the same question you did, which is, would it cause any great harm to delay this for a month other than the fact that you lose me as a member of Plum, and bring it back after having done more of the outreach that some
I don't
folks are
believe,
looking
Councilman,
for.
that it would. But on the other hand, just maybe to raise your comfort level, I think Mr. Bell has gone to extraordinary lengths to build a platform that does not exclude what we've already done, because we are most anxious not to find ourselves in a vice of our own creation. However, if that's what the committee wants, I don't believe that there's any issue that says this is a life or death situation in the next 25 or 30 days.
Okay. Well, one more option would be to, if you think it's doable, just to have a meeting before it gets to council and have everybody chime in, and whatever changes might arise could be added in council. That's where you save time. We keep on track, but it does create a little bit more work for you or your office to...
The office has no issue with that. Anything that makes the thing work.
Well, let's try that then. We'll keep this moving. We'll finish hearing the public comments. We'll make our decision with understanding that the possibility of having a meeting between now and council can hopefully address the concerns Mr. Appleton and the emails I got will facilitate a smoother transition.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you.
Okay. Michael Cohn and Joe Cariago. Hi, good afternoon.
Thank you for having me. My name is Mike Cohn. I'm with Bank of America Home Loans. And I just wanted to bring up, there is a certain point of urgency here. And that is there's a couple of loft projects that are going on right now that are opening up for sale. They're going to be wanting to close escrows in the next 30, 45 days. These guys are, dangling on a vine right now, hoping that this...
And you're with the Bank of America.
Yeah. I'm B of A.
First time a bank coming to committee.
Well,
my
experience was this. I've been the primary lender on the majority of the projects in downtown LA and in Hollywood. So if there was a loft project down here, chances are I was the primary lender on it.
So are we going to get any of that stimulus money into the streets?
If we can get FHA in here, there'll be some money. So if we can get FHA going, we're good. But I just wanted to come up here and say, look, I've talked to most of these buyers. I know who they are. 99.9% of these people are using these lofts as residential space. A small handful of them are using it, as a commercial space. The live work ordinance that is enacted right now, this 1/3 live, 2/3 work, is doing nothing really because there's no real way to police it regardless. So there's no one out there with a tape measure saying it's 1/3 live, 2/3 work. What it's doing is it's making language in the live work ordinance that would be more agreeable to FHA, and that's what's really necessary in downtown Los Angeles and in Hollywood. And that's all I got.
Well, thank you for coming down, and
thank you for
sorry for joking around with the stimulus dollars. We're still waiting, but that's okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rose. I'm Terry Copham, the City Attorney's Office. I just wanted to remind the committee that this will go to City Attorney first before it goes to the full council. So as far as the timing of what you're suggesting, I just wanted to remind you of that.
Thank you for that. And if it goes to the City Attorney's office, how long will it take there?
That I can't say.
More or less?
I don't know, a month? I don't know.
A month? Okay, so it's going to take 4 weeks anyway in City Attorneys at a minimum, which does cover next month. So that's pressure for you, Mr. Fisher.
And I can add that you also can ask that the ordinance be scheduled in committee on a given date, so that'll allow people to comment on the ordinance.
Well, that just puts more pressure on the City Attorney's office, isn't it? Okay.
Ain't no objection to that.
Okay. Joe Cariago and Russell Brown.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Catalago, and I'm with the Building Industry Association. As you know, in this economic downturn, the credit market remains extremely tight and restrictive, and which makes it very difficult to obtain a mortgage. We fully agree with the comments from CCA. The city has worked hard to make the live-work units a viable housing option in LA, and we would hate to see the momentum be stalled because of a definitional issue. We believe this amendment is in line with the city's interest in bringing jobs, business, and residents to LA City, and therefore we strongly support urgent passage of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Ms. Brown?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Russell Brown. I'm Executive Director of the Historic Downtown Bid. I think there's no other neighborhood more emblematic of some of the challenges of this, and we're very much in support of this. In the Old Bank District, which was abandoned buildings that have been turned into residences, you have a commercial neighborhood with neighborhood serving retail, neighborhood uses, businesses, art galleries, literally the center of Gallery Row in the arts community, with residences up above. Many of the residences, including my own, have businesses that we run out of. Most of them now with telecommuting, smartphones, internet, software engineers, writers, designers, even many of the artists are doing exactly the activities that we have here. And this ordinance would only apply for condominium units that were for future financing. So in the arts district, almost all the property, and the typical sort of starving artist is in a rental unit, not a condominium unit. The brewery, the Santa Fe Arts Community, all of the traditional arts communities are rental units, not condominium units, so this would only apply for those new ones. And even within the ordinance, there's quite a bit of flexibility. It's not uncommon in the buildings that we have that many people live there, they have businesses, and have the businesses grow, they will move into a storefront, or they'll even take over a second apartment. So the Rowan building just went into a fire sale. Typical unit that had been $800,000 then became $500,000. A typical 20% down plus 5% closing cost meant you needed almost $125,000 to buy even a distressed property. With this, as little as 3% down could get you in. So imagine the difference between selling condos at $125,000 down and $15,000 down. So this is important, and literally we can take this through the Gallery Row organization, the Gallery Owners organization, and do the outreach in the 6 weeks or 8 weeks that we need, and make sure all the arts community is involved in this decision too.
Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. I've been very active in the area in several different environments and settings, so appreciate your hard work. That concludes the public hearing. Our action would be to request the city attorney prepare and present the ordinance should we pass this. And I think what that does, it gives everyone time to kind of take a deep breath and look at what this really means. And Mr. Fisher, an excellent deputy for Councilman Perry, and they've been very proactive in many of the issues. So this will be just another item on your table there, Mr. Fisher. But we can move to have the city attorney prepare and present the ordinance. We'll second that.
I'd second that with a direction to do outreach to the appropriate folks before it comes back to the committee.
Okay, Mr. Brown. So we're okay?
Councilman, right. I think Mr. Bell also mentioned something about building code standards. So I don't know if that's going to be incorporated.
That would be to amend the action of the City Planning Commission to amend the light and ventilation standards within the alternative building standards for live-work units, to update them to be consistent with the LABC. Currently, they are not consistent, and this is simply a technical correction to remove that inconsistency, and this is at the request of the Department of Building and Safety.
So those details and that discussion could occur as part of the meetings you'll have with the various constituencies, correct? What that means, because it seems pretty, I think, if folks don't understand what that means, they can feel intimidated by those changes.
Right. I mean, what it means is that you have the standards for live-work units are inconsistent with the Los Angeles Building Code. And this is merely an opportunity, since this ordinance is going forward, to bring them into consistency, because those are the standards that these live-work units are subject to. So to bring it all into consistency, we just simply need to update the light and ventilation standards to be consistent with what is already required. And again, we do have, I believe, a representative from Building and Safety who can speak to that probably more accurately than I can.
I have to point out that there are so many commenters on the other side.
I understand.
Very subtle things to be talked about the cost.
I'm sure Mr. Appleton, Mr. Fisher will absorb what you're saying and put in the process. Anything else to add, sir?
Good afternoon, council members. Dave Lara with the Department of Building and Safety. Yes, actually, we concur with Mr. Bell on this issue, and just more simply put, the codes, the more recent codes that we're currently enforcing had changed in the last couple of years. So this is basically catching up with all, this is just one of the provisions that we enforce, of course, but this is just basically catching up and making sure that the current 2008 LA City Building Code is current with that portion, which therefore affects this type of use. So that's basically what that is. It's catch up.
Got you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so that'll be the instructions. Thank you, Mr. CLA. And our next action?
Council members, it would be item 6. It's a zone change. It's a demolition of an existing single-family commercial building, and it's for the construction of a new mixed-use development, which will include student housing and retail in CD9.
This is item number 6?
Correct.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi. Sarah Regamet Hounsel with the Planning Department. The applicant's going to speak to you in a few minutes, and he has one request for a change for queue condition number 35. Staff has reviewed this change and finds that the modification to that condition is consistent with the mitigation to monitor noise for future occupants. So we're in agreement with that change. I don't believe there's any other changes, so at that point we recommend that you approve the ordinance with that minor change on condition number 35. Thank you.
Okay. We have several speakers on this one. Mr. Fisher? Oh, did he leave? Okay, we'll move on, and we have Hans Guerrero, I believe. Is Hans here? Then David Hilliard. And then I believe it's Claire Bronowski. Good afternoon, sir.
I was just here to provide technical basis for the noise mitigation measure, and since staff has already concurred with our request, I'm just here to answer any questions.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is David Hilliard. I'm with the Martin Group. We are the owners and developers of the proposed student housing project on Figueroa. Over the last couple of months, oh, by the way, there's a correction. The demolition is an existing industrial building, single-story industrial building on Figueroa. Over the past couple of months, we've received a lot of nice support from from the community. I don't think there's anyone here in opposition to the project. And the only thing we were asking for was the modification of the queue condition in accordance with the letter that we submitted to Plum and in accordance with what Ms. Rigamat has said from Planning Commission in accordance with the letter from Jan Perry's office. If there are any questions regarding this issue, please feel free to ask. And I think that's everything I have to say.
Okay, thank you, sir. Does that cover everybody else? Oh, hi, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I have nothing to add. I was just here to answer questions if any came up about the
So I
mitigation.
could have said, anyone in agreement could have said yes, anyone just stood up.
Yeah, we support staff and thank them.
All right, Mr. Fisher.
Council members, I'm sorry I was outside for a moment. Councilwoman Perry asked me to read a not terribly long letter into the record. There's some technical issues. I support the mixed-use student housing project being developed by the Martin Group at 2700 South Figueroa Street. It will be a vibrant, LEED-certified development along the Figueroa corridor and will provide 171 much-needed student housing as well as units, as well as 22,000 square feet of neighborhood-serving retail. As you know, the Figueroa corridor is an important link between South Los Angeles and downtown. It is a major transportation corridor and will soon be home to the Expo Light Rail, making it an efficient and essential connector. This development has effectively addressed the Figueroa corridor by providing for pedestrian-friendly sidewalks and other amenities such as extensive landscaping and bicycle racks. I would like to request that condition Q35 in the City Planning Department report be modified as follows to mitigate noise from the Expo light rail. A, the proposed project shall comply with the noise insulation standards of Title 24 of the California Code of Regulations, which ensures an acceptable interior noise environment, and B, all residential exterior windows within the proposed project shall be constructed with double pane glass. All exterior wall construction shall provide a sound transmission class of 50 or greater, as defined by UBC number 35-1, 1979 edition, or any amendment thereto. I believe these amendments will meet the intent of the City Planning Department and are consistent with conditions placed on other developments on the Figueroa corridor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Let's see anyone else. We'd like to move to support the report with the conditions as articulated by the council office in their letter. And have a second on that?
Second.
Subject to action of this committee. Next item, Roberto.
Councilman, I believe you approved item 9 before, so the next item would be item 10, which is a draft ordinance which establishes the boundaries for the Broadway Theater CDO in CD 14.
I don't believe we did take an action on 9, but I'm assuming it's approved.
Did you act on the hardship exemption on item 9?
There was one he worked, but not the other. How about number 9, Councilmember, and committee? We do need to.
I didn't see any claims, but we did act on that.
Okay, all right, thank you. So it's approved, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, we
thank
did.
you.
Yes.
Thank you, Barbara. Keeping us on our toes. All right, item number 10.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Patricia Diefendorfer, Planning Department staff. Before you is an ordinance to adopt boundaries to establish a community design overlay district that would apply to the properties on Broadway from 2nd Street to Olympic Boulevard in the Central City Community Plan area. There's a map here for your information. The Community Design Overlay District is intended to improve the aesthetic quality and the physical environment of this segment of Broadway, to promote a pedestrian-friendly mixed-use district, and to encourage complementary nighttime uses necessary to support a theater and entertainment district anchored by the corridor's 12 historic theaters. The Community Design Overlay District design guidelines and standards were approved by the City Planning Commission on July 9th, 2009. The ordinance that's before you is to establish the boundaries and to apply Q or qualified conditions on the zoning, which are also needed to further implement the design overlay district. The Q conditions regulate things like use, setbacks, and building massing, among other design elements intended to improve the pedestrian orientation of Broadway. There is one technical correction that staff would like to make to one of the Q conditions. The correction is to amend condition 1 to add a code citation to clarify which uses constitute the proposed prohibited adult entertainment uses. Staff has submitted a revised final ordinance that includes this correction to the clerk for the record, and you should have that before you. That ordinance also includes an earlier technical correction which involved removing a sign-related condition to ensure consistency with citywide sign regulations. And we also submitted revised findings per the advice of the city attorney. So that concludes the report. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Well, we'll go through the different comments. Let's have any questions, Councilmember? No? We do have with us Jessica Wedding, and would you like to speak first, or from district office, or last?
If it pleases the chair, the council office will defer until after the stakeholders have spoken.
Okay, thank you. That being said, let's call up the next group of folks. Tara Habichu, Cheryl Tangri, and Russell Brown. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you? Today, the Broadway CDO that is before you represents a vision that was conceived in 2003 by the Historic Downtown Business Improvement District to establish Broadway as a destination entertainment zone featuring the historic theaters and buildings. I've been involved with this effort since its inception in 2003 when I served as chairwoman for the entertainment committee of the bid, which was crafted with the property owner's consent at the time. Since then, I've been working hand in hand with the Planning Department CDO Working Group, and I also serve as a current trustee for the Bringing Back Broadway for Councilman Jose Huizar. The CDO is an essential and critical foundation piece to a complex puzzle of revitalizing Broadway. In addition, it gives lasting protection to these nationally recognized treasures. Beyond this, the CDO will allow us to develop programs to aid in future progress in arresting the decline of Broadway, such as helping the businesses with a facade improvement program, outreach to businesses to give design and financial assistance, and to attract more people to shop on Broadway. I fully support the CDO and would like to express my highest recommendation for the committee to approve the Broadway CDO that is before you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Shiraz Tangri. Good afternoon, sir.
You did, Mr. Chair. Shiraz Tangri, Ralston Bird. I'm here in my capacity as the planning co-chair for the Downtown Neighborhood Council. I serve for the Neighborhood Council as a trustee to the Bringing Back Broadway initiative. The Neighborhood Council has been strongly in support of the Broadway initiative. Again, I would once again single out the Planning Department's commitment in working on the CDO. In essentially a little over a year, they were able to bring the CDO through the planning process, which included extensive public outreach. They worked. They met on nearly a weekly basis with a working group that was reviewing in detail the proposed plans, met with the Broadway stakeholder group, which includes private property owners along Broadway, as well as the various city agencies that touch planning issues on a very regular basis, and then as well held multiple public workshops. Is that me?
Go ahead. Can you conclude, please?
So the Neighborhood Council is very much in support of the CDO, and we think these type of guidelines are actually going to encourage economic development by providing predictability for proposed investment. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Russell Brown. Just a reminder, the clock is right there, so you can keep eye on it, so you can get to your point.
Thanks.
Russ
Russ Brown,
Buzz.
Executive Director of the Historic Downtown Bid and President Downtown LA Neighborhood Council. We're very much in support of this. Actually, we were one of the partners in this. We want to congratulate both the city and especially Jose Huizar's office for shepherding this through. Literally, we've met for more than a year, 2 to 4 hour sessions, almost weekly. As this went through, there were many community meetings, both the bids, the businesses, the neighborhood councils, the residents, the historic theater owners have all been involved in this. And we really strove to create a document that not only balanced historic preservation, but economic development that really revitalized the whole district and not only preserved the soul of what was part of Los Angeles, but also created new life. LA Conservancy and the Office of Historic Resources have also been involved in this. We slogged through this paragraph by paragraph, also word by word, and created an incredibly detailed document that we think is really a great document to be a master plan for the community, and we appreciate this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Akira Mashaka, Mike Bowler, and then Jessica. Good afternoon, sir.
My name is Akita Mashaka. I'm owner of a restaurant chain called Hoagies and Wings, and if you guys haven't had Hoagies and Wings, you guys are really missing out. We also have gotwings.com.
Should buy some samples.
Yeah, which is, I only have a minute and you guys can't eat that fast. I was told gotwings.com is the place where you get wings online. We moved here about a year ago, and one thing we were surprised is how Broadway at night, it doesn't have the activity that it could. We've pressed the issue, and most of the places close around 6 o'clock, but we stay open till 10. And one thing we've noticed is that we get a lot of people, a lot of foreigners from the hotels. And there are a lot of people walking on Broadway really looking for what Los Angeles has to offer. And I think...
But I heard you correctly, you did say foreigners?
Well, foreigners as in from Italy, from visitors.
Some of the international community, right?
International
there
community.
You go, that's the
people
way.
People coming to LA to visit at the Biltmore and the...
So what a clever work, Mr. Mashaka.
Yes.
I mean, it's a great commercial to start off with.
Oh. So anyway, I don't want to lose much time. But the thing is that we're here to, as a business owner, I'm an example of a business owner, here to support this initiative. And to say that this is a really good thing. Ironically, I just got back from New York, and Broadway there, it's gotten so great that they even stopped the streets and people are kind of hanging out in chairs. It's gotten so great. We already have Joe Torre come to the Dodgers. We see what's happened there, so all we got to do is just add one more thing, and then we could be...
We have a great international community there, too,
yes,
right?
Yes. All right, well, I got 18 minutes. Thank you. I'm here to show my support. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that was a good one. I think it's the second time we had a commercial here in committee. Mike Bueller?
Good afternoon, committee members. Mike Bueller, Director of Advocacy with the Los Angeles Conservancy. I'm also here as chair of the Bringing Back Broadway Preservation Planning and Infrastructure Committee. And as an active participant in Councilmember Weezar's Bringing Back Broadway initiative, the Conservancy fully supports the proposed community design overlay for Broadway. The proposed CDO is a major milestone for longstanding efforts to revitalize Broadway as an entertainment district, providing clarity to property owners and helping to ensure complementary development along the historic corridor. As mentioned by previous speakers, the design guide before you is the product of an extensive process involving a wide range of downtown stakeholders, meeting regularly over a span of several months. I would like to particularly recognize the persistence and patience of planning staff and council staff in overseeing an inclusive and expeditious process and ultimately successful product before you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And now...
Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Wethington McLean. I serve as the Executive Director for Councilmember Weezar's Bringing Back Broadway, and he's very sorry that he wasn't feeling well and can't be here to speak about this important project himself. He's been incredibly instrumental in moving it forward and really rallying the right people to the table and all of the people to the table. It's another tool in the toolbox for Broadway, and we think that this is the right way to go about it. What you may not know is that the design guidelines actually have existed for a while out there. We've revised them and modified them and brought them up to the current kind of ideal for Broadway. But the Conservancy, CRA LA, and a number of downtown stakeholders worked on these guidelines for years, but they didn't have a political champion and they were not made public policy. So we have the honor today of taking products that have been worked on for so many years by so many people who care about Broadway and really turning them into a piece of public policy that we can all stand behind. The council member asked me to please be sure to thank a few people who've been very instrumental. Gail Goldberg, who arranged the itinerary for a delegation that we took to San Diego 1 year ago next week, actually, where a lot of these ideas came from. And she was just fabulous in really touring us around the gas lamp and talking about pedestrian activity in an urban core and really understanding how design guidelines can help create that. The LA Conservancy and CRA and others for the development of some of the urban design lighting guidelines that have come before us. Mike Bueller especially on behalf of the Conservancy. Patricia Diefendorfer has just done the yeoman's work on this. She's been outstanding and has overseen Marian Askew, Gabriela Juarez, and Nick Marisick as well on this. We'd also like to thank Ken Bernstein and his crew in the Office of Historic Resources. And last but not least, every member of the working group. We had 12 people that came together at least twice a month for at least 4 hours and hammered through this every single month for a little over a year. We had a number of meetings where we had more than 200 people come out and talk about the design guideline to really understand what it was going to look like, what they would be able to do, and how they could do it. And the community really got behind it. So we're blessed, we're fortunate, and we're honored to be able to lead this effort. And Councilmember would be grateful for your support on the design guide as well.
I just want to say congratulations to Councilmember Weezar and the staff and the planning staff and everyone that works hard on these goals, and to get this kind of traction, it really is admirable. But the one question I have and I want to phrase it in a friendly way, so don't misinterpret what I'm going to say. When you look at the role Broadway Corridor has played for the past 30, 40 years, and you have, I believe the last number I heard was about 20,000 new residencies or residents in the area that wasn't there, I think something like 8 years ago. The gentrification and access to certain types of shops and businesses, how did the working group address that, or did they?
Well, it's interesting. Just as Broadway has changed from the 20s to the 30s to the 40s to the 50s to the 60s, it's changed a lot since the 80s and the 90s, which was sort of its high rent heyday in terms of retail. We have about a 15 to 20% vacancy rate on the ground floor right now on Broadway. We have 1 million square feet of completely unoccupied commercial space in the upper floors, in the middle of our city.
How much is that?
About 1 million square feet completely
Wow.
unoccupied, up to 2 million that's underutilized, meaning a garment guy that might be there twice a week.
So it's not going to displace anybody because there's so much
we don't
there.
feel this displaces anyone. We feel this
Good.
gives, and in fact, a lot of what you see on Broadway right now doesn't meet current code right now, but this will help give some finer grained ideas of how to do your projects in a way that really honors the historic. We have a National Register Historic District in the middle of our city, so we don't think this displaces anyone. Hopefully it attracts more people to come in and
Right.
fill those vacancies.
I just have to ask, 'cause I know that's in the back of many people's minds.
course.
And when they don't know the facts for what they
course.
are, it's good to have them out in the public and then on the record. And it's now folks can understand what opportunity lies here.
A lot.
So thank you so much.
Councilmember.
Congratulations. Any comments from the councilmember? So I'm going to move that.
It's great. I'd just like to move the item.
Absolutely. Okay. So we can act to approve this item and have a second. That'll be action of this committee.
We did get revised findings that were also submitted for this particular revised findings, and of course, the technical correction to the ordinance. So it's approved as amended.
Approved as amended.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
I have a statement that I need from my office on
Okay.
the next item. I don't know the item, but at the appropriate time, I'll just take the mic and...
Let it go. All right. Okay, Roberto, next item?
Council members, it's item 11. It's an appeal by Regency Outdoor Advertising, and they're appealing exemptions from the Hollywood SUD for super graphic signs and other signage.
Okay, number 11.
Good evening, Councilman Craig Weber, planning staff. The item before you is an appeal regarding a specific plan exception and a specific plan project permit to install super graphics, tenant signs, and wayfinding signs on a proposed mixed-use project at 6200 Hollywood Boulevard. The Central Area Planning Commission granted the specific plan exception to allow three things: to allow more than 2 super graphics on an individual building, to allow super graphics and tenant signs to share building facades, and then to allow a combined sign area that would exceed the amount of combined sign area that would be allowed by the pending amendments to the Hollywood Sign District Ordinance. The Central Area Planning Commission also granted a specific plan project permit indicating compliance with all other provisions of the Hollywood Sign District Supplemental Use District. The appeal contends that the specific plan project permit was granted in error because the project permit presupposes that the applicant rightfully obtained takedown credits, which are required in order to install super graphics. The planning department contends that the appeal is filed in error. In April 29, 2008, Claret, the applicant for the project, was awarded the takedown credits for removal of several billboards and pole signs on the project site. This grant was awarded by the director and no appeal was filed. In December 19, 2008, a request by Regency, the appellant for the same sign credits, was denied by the director. And it should be stated clearly that we can't have an instance where the same sign credits are issued twice for the same signs. An appeal of this decision was filed, and then in April 14 of this year, the Central Area Planning Commission denied that appeal, contending that sign credits cannot be issued twice, and because Claret is the property owner on record with the county tax assessor records, and because their application was properly filed and notarized, that they should be awarded the sign credits to the extent to which the Area Planning Commission has discretion on that matter. So for that reason, the Planning Department is recommending denial of the appeal and upholding of the Central Area Planning Commission's determination.
Okay, because just repeat that last part one more time. Please, we talk about credits and what's in front of us and what isn't in front of us.
Certainly. So by way of background, in order to install super graphics within the Hollywood Sign District, one needs to obtain takedown credits. And those can be obtained by applying for credit to remove billboards and pole signs, and there are ratios based on square footage. So Claret, the landowner on record, in April of 2008 applied for and obtained the needed takedown credits for billboards on site. So in other words, they wanted to put up super graphics, they applied to take down signs on site. And
but there's a critical question there that I just want to ask you. You based your decision on ownership on what?
The decision was based, the decision on the part of the Area Planning Commission was based on property ownership, that Claret is the landowner on record. They hold a long-term lease.
What record are you looking at?
County tax assessor records.
So it's a county tax assessor.
It is, and there are municipal code sections, and this is all information that was for consideration before the Central Area Planning Commission. There are actually code sections which indicate what information is needed to be supplied on an application in order for it to be considered, and Claret's application was properly filed, and they were considered to be the property owner on record.
Okay, so that's the pivotal point, sir. Councilman?
Yeah, this is a somewhat confusing legal issue, and I guess the question is, does the owner of the property or the owner of the billboard have the right to these credits? Because it appears that the property owner was given the credits. Does the city have a policy that the property owner owns the billboard for the purpose of these credits, or the billboard owner owns the credits?
The policy is that the property owner owns the credits, and any discussion beyond that really becomes a civil matter as to what the terms are of an individual lease, whether or not that lease is valid, and so on and so forth.
Terry Kaufman, Macias City Attorney's Office. I just wanted to read two statements into the record that might clarify. Number one, the underlined approvals to Claret, if the committee denies the appeal, does not confer rights to the issuance of sign permits. That is subject to applicable laws of the city at the time any application for a sign permit is made. The second thing is there is a lawsuit that's pending between Regency, Claret, and the city on the rightful ownership of the subject sign credits, and any super graphics authorized by the specific plan, the project permit compliance, will be awarded consistent with the ruling in that case. I don't know if that helps, but...
So it's more like stay tuned.
Well, it doesn't necessarily help me that much. What I want to be clear on is that we have a city law, and someone can point it out to me, that says the property owner gets these credits and not the billboard owner, because I think that looks like it's what the question is. And I want to know that there actually is some sort of specific direction, and we're not just doing this on the fly.
I don't know the answer to that question. I just had to read the statement, and I'm sorry I can't provide the answer to what you're asking.
So I had made the wrong, perhaps wrong assumption that the billboard owner would own the billboard and therefore would own the credit. So I think to be able to go forward, we'd probably need to know where we are legally, whether we did the right thing because it's in the law, or whether we did the wrong thing and then said, well, we can't give the billboard company the credits because we've already done the wrong thing.
And I think it's safe to say that both the applicant and the appellant are championing at the bit to give you your 2 cents on that same question. However, the precedent that was set by the Area Planning Commission's determination was that the credits would always be awarded to the landowner.
Right. So why don't we do this, Councilor? Why don't we listen to the different the appellants and everyone in the public comment, then we can ask that question again. But I think you're going to hear some very differing opinions as to what is in front of us in terms of the different claims that we'll hear. Because I heard from the city attorney that there's a statement being made and cannot answer the question at this time. And we're hearing the planning staff making decisions based on what they see in the code book, which is you go by the owner, which is indicated by the county recorder's office, which is the parcel That's how they made their decision. And so I think we're going to hear some more details. If you don't mind, we can keep moving forward on the public comment, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so let's hear from the appellants first. Is that coming up? Give us your name, address.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Ron Turovsky. I represent the appellant in this matter, Regency Outdoor Advertising. I'm with Manat, Phelps & Phillips, and I appreciate the opportunity to address this appeal and the questions that were just posed. We would urge the City Council, the committee and the City Council ultimately to grant the appeal. We've submitted a letter to your office, to the committee, indicating the reasons why we would urge that. And I won't repeat all those comments now, but I obviously am here to answer questions. But fundamentally, I think that what's important to take into consideration is that the statements that just made, and we'll go through this, are not consistent with the law. The statements about who is entitled to the credits, clearly under the law, is the billboard owner, not the landowner. That's also consistent with the policy that has been followed, with the exception of this particular item, in the past. Just to note quickly, we don't oppose the project. We don't oppose the configuration of the signs. What we oppose is the fact that there are further steps being taken that are predicated on utilization of credits that do, under the law, belong to Regency Outdoor Advertising as the owner of the signs. By way of specific background on this, the credits that are referenced in this particular application are 12,655 square feet. The credits that are referenced are based on a variety of signs, some of which belong to Regency Outdoor Advertising, specifically 3 signs, 6 sign faces. 12,096 square feet of those 12,655 that are the subject of this appeal today belong to Regency and relate to the signs that they own. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is that the sign program that was created by the city specifies that the credits go to the sign owner, not the landowner of the signs. The law is clear. It says it explicitly in the language that it is to be apportioned to the sign owners, not to the landowners. It says specifically to the sign owners. Moreover, in the application, there's language that indicates you're supposed to show proof of ownership of the signs. So all of the language that is in the ordinance indicates that it's to be given to the billboard owner. In the past, that has been what has happened. In this particular case, we went in and filed an application to get these credits, and we were told, much to our shock, that they had already been given to another party, in this instance, a lessor of property on the land, the applicant here today. And we were told that that was not necessarily even correct, but that there was nothing that could be done about it because, as indicated, 2 sets of signs, 2 sets of credits can't be given, and so we're just going to have to sort this out. So our application was denied. We appealed that to the Central Area Planning Commission, and what was stated in terms of what they did was not as stated. In fact, all they basically said is this is a hot potato, very difficult, and it's going to have to go to the courts. So we filed a petition for writ of mandate in the Superior Court, trying to get an order that requires that the city convey these credits to Regency. So, moving forward, 2 weeks after that determination by the APC, this matter came up. And I think you'll understand that when the city and with the applicant taking any further steps to now act upon these credits that in fairness and under the law belong to Regency, we had to take these steps to come before you and appeal that, and have. So we believe that the appropriate thing to do is allow the courts to sort this out. There's no urgency in moving forward with this matter here today in terms of getting the approvals that are the subject of this particular appeal, and instead let the courts sort it out, and at the end of the day, we'll have a determination of ownership of the signs. Just as the APC said, we can't do it. We're going to need the courts to sort it out. So we've been required to do that and have done that. At a minimum, we requested and want clarification and assurances that nothing done today would in any way jeopardize that litigation, that would in any way jeopardize and make further any arguments about additional action being taken, that it's an absolute status quo timeout. That's certainly the way it should have been handled. Last week we were here, we were told that a proposal was made to remove a condition from remove a condition from what was before you, one of the determination conditions, and that would solve this problem. And then we learned today that they don't want to do that, that in fact, based on the statement of the city attorney's office, these matters are completely bifurcated, are completely separate, and from their perspective, our litigation position will be secured, and that in fact, no further steps. This doesn't cause any greater rights than whatever the determination did 2 weeks ago, a month ago, or that is the subject of the litigation. But fundamentally, our position is that the right way to proceed here is to grant the appeal, not have any further steps taken, and at a minimum recognize that in light of this litigation, these matters should be completely bifurcated and separated, and nothing done here today would in any way jeopardize our rights, would in any way further the rights of anyone else, because I think it will complicate the city's position as well as Regency's. So that is fundamentally what we would urge you to do here today.
Thank you, sir.
If there are any particular questions, I'd be happy to address it.
Not at this time, unless you have any questions. Anyone else here on behalf of the appellant? Let's say no one else. Let's move to John Bowman. And then Ben Resnick.
Good afternoon, Chairman Reyes, Councilmember Koretz. My name is John Bowman with Jeffrey Mangels, Butler, and Marlboro. My firm represents Claret Hollywood LLC, which is the developer of the Boulevard 6200 project and the applicant in this case. In our letters to the committee, dated July 22 and August 3rd, we outlined numerous reasons why we believe that this committee should recommend denial of the appeal filed by Regency Outdoor Advertising. But perhaps none of those arguments is more important than the fact that the issues raised by Regency in its appeal were not issues that were decided by the Area Planning Commission on April 28th of this year, and therefore are not issues that are presently before the City Council for decision. Specifically, Regency's argument that the Area Planning Commission somehow erred in deciding that the so-called takedown credits should be awarded to Claret as opposed to Regency. That was not a decision that was made by the Area Planning Commission on April 28th. Rather, that decision was made by the Director of Planning over a year ago, when the Director of Planning approved Claret's application for what's called a sign reduction program. That is a mechanism under the ordinance by which the city determines that these so-called takedown credits should be awarded. So they were awarded, granted over a year ago to Claret. That decision was not appealed, was not challenged in court, and therefore is a final decision as to the City of Los Angeles. That decision, or interpretation, if you will, was also more recently affirmed by the Area Planning Commission in a different decision, specifically on April 14 of this year, when the Area Planning Commission denied Regency's appeal from the Director's decision to deny its application for the same takedown credits. So again, in another recent decision, the city has made an interpretation and determined that Claret was properly granted those takedown credits. That decision is final, it was not appealable, and again, as you heard, is has been challenged in court by Regency. But it's a final decision. So if I could just sum up in 30 seconds, what the APC did, and the only decision that's before the council at this time, is to approve the sign program for Claret. And as part of that determination, determined that the sign program met the requirements of the ordinance, and with respect to super graphics, based that decision on the fact that the takedown credits had already been granted to Claret, and there is simply no...
Thank you, Mr. Bowman.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We urge your denial of the appeal.
Mr. Resnick. Keep an eye on the clock, Mr. Resnick.
What's that?
You got the 2 minutes right there.
Oh.
All right. Chair Reyes and Member Koretz, Ben Resnick for the record with Jeffrey Mangles. Here's why, in a simple way to understand why the city's policy and law makes sense. First of all, understand that Regency was a tenant on the property. As a tenant, it had a right to do business. The business was to put up a sign. It needed a permit, just like any other business. Whether you're a store, a retailer, you get a sign, but you need the landlord's consent to put it on. For many years, they had a sign. Their lease expired. They're gone. The signs were, the physical signs were taken down by Claret because they own the property. And so the city wants to make sure that when new signs go up, that you don't have a duplication of signs. In other words, that's a sign reduction program. In order to do that, the city requires that the property owner record a covenant on his land that says, we the property owner agree to never let another sign go up here. A sign company cannot do that. They don't own the property. A sign company, in this case, Regency, is trying to argue that because they had the right to operate a billboard for which they paid rent and now their term is expired, they have a right to be able to take that credit elsewhere. But the city does not allow those credits without recording a covenant on the property owner's property.
So,
they don't have that authority.
Just for the sake of clarity, you have in your...
Stop my time.
You have the ability to show that it expired, that it no longer belonged to them because no longer was leased to them or rented?
Yes. Sure.
Okay.
The lease expired.
Okay.
There's no dispute on that. The lease expired.
Okay.
The signs are down.
Okay.
And so when Claret went through its process of the building and it showed the integrated new super graphics and signs to the community, all of which were approved and went through all the approvals, what you have now before you would be a power grab by a sign company to try to hold on to something they no longer are entitled to. Their lease has expired. And so if you look at it any other way, you'd be basically expanding sign company rights to be able to take a sign, go elsewhere, but they don't have the right to be able to encumber a property and say no more signs on that property. And that's why the logic of what's being presented to you by Mr. Turovsky makes no sense. Because Claret will never agree not to have a sign on its property, and they will never be able to utilize it.
I know we're going to get on the road, so go ahead.
A question for both sides. Do both sides agree that Claret took down the sign? Okay, so you say they did, the other side says not.
Okay. Answer? I didn't answer yet. Well, go ahead. The answer is we took down the signs. We pulled building permits and took down the signs. That is the way it works. And the leases provide that we own the signs, can take them down at any time during the lease or at the termination of the lease. They belong to us. They're our property. Any statement to the contrary is utterly false. But we took those signs down and pulled the building permits to be able to do so. And we don't disagree with that. Their lease expired. They were told they're terminated, and they get to take that down. If they don't take it down, we do it for them. And so if that answers the question, their right to operate there has terminated.
So let me ask them, did you take down the sign before or after the lease expired?
They took it down. We took these signs down upon a lengthy negotiation over renewal and price. And ultimately, when the negotiations were unacceptable to Regency, we concurred it's time for these leases to end. We're removing these signs. Claret has, during the course of those negotiations, was happy to have these signs continue. We would not pay the amounts that they were requesting and requiring, and the negotiations broke down, and that was the end of those leases. And
so
interestingly,
you're saying that the lease, that your commitment with the lease had expired? Is that what you're saying?
well, both sides had the right at any time to walk away, and when the negotiations we couldn't reach agreement on price, we both said we're done, and that's at the conclusion. Again, we own those signs, and when the leases are done, either whether terminated or when we mutually agree or one side walks away,
We own those signs.
For me, it's an issue of timing. Who had control of that land when these decisions were being made by the Director of Planning? The Director of Planning made that decision. Who controlled the signs?
When the signs were the subject of, certainly when the signs were the subject of the Claret application, where they originally purported to get these credits, the signs were up and they remained up for a lengthy period of time after that in a status quo situation where both sides continue to have these signs up. When we applied, again, the signs were up. At any time, we could have said, we're done, we're going to remove the signs. But in any event, at some point in time, when the negotiations to keep these signs, when the negotiations and price over signs were at an end, we did not go forward with any continuation or extension of the leases. What basically happened is the leases were terminated at some point in time, and then the parties ended up in a negotiation and then extended on a month-to-month those signs. And they remained up, and the parties had different views of the valuation of what those signs were worth. And at the very end, Claret had something in mind that was too high, and Regency said no, and the relationship ended, and the signs no longer remain. The leases were terminated.
Okay.
But during that entire period of time, those signs belong to Regency, not to the landowner. The policy that has been stated that they always belong to the landowner and not to the sign owner is not consistent with what the city has done in the past. And in fact, Mr. Resnick says that my argument is if the word was preposterous or absurd. He has a lawsuit pending against the city where he basically takes on that policy and says the present situation is that the large billboard owners get all these credits because only they have the ability to get credits.
Okay, I have a funny feeling we keep talking about this, and we have one more item after this as well. So maybe we can raise some... any other questions, Councilman? I'm going to make sure that you both get a shot at this.
Yeah, I would just like to conclude my statement, because I know my time kind of expired as we were going into this. May I just remind the committee, the issue of who owns those credits is not before you or the City Council. Only thing before you is this question. Did the Central Area Planning Commission err or abuse its discretion when it approved a sign program for the Claret project? It did not make a determination on who owns what. It did not make a determination on credits. That was not before them. You have a very narrow question before you. Did they err or abuse their discretion?
Okay, got you.
That's all.
I got you. All right.
The question of who owns
Thank you, Mr. Resnick. All right. Any other questions?
Well, I'm not entirely clear on this legal question. To me, it sounds pretty wide open, and I'm not entirely clear on what the urgency is to determine it before the legal question is resolved.
Well, Madam Attorney, can you reread your statement? Maybe have a stronger relevance now that we heard both sides.
Okay, there we go. Terry Kaufman, City Attorney's Office. Yes, I'll reread it, but I would like to point out that you do have the two things that are before you are the specific plan project permit compliance review, and there are findings that are in your materials that you have to make, and also the same for the specific plan exception findings. And those are not, they don't relate to ownership. But the statement that I'll repeat is that the underlying approvals to Claret in no way confer rights to the issuance of sign permits, which shall be subject to the applicable laws of the city at any time any application for a sign permit is made. That's number one. And number two, there is a lawsuit pending between Regency Claret and the city on the rightful ownership of the subject sign credits, and any super graphics authorized by the approvals that are the subject of the appeal today will be awarded consistent with the ruling in that case.
Okay. So, Councilman Corretz, let's finish with the public hearing. I believe the council office is here as well. Not yet. We'll make a statement. And since they're entrenched in this and it's their district, let's finish the public hearing at 2 more cards, and we'll hear from the council, then we'll go from there. So, Frank Stefan. And then Russell Brown.
Frank Stefan with the Claret Group, thank you. I wanted to start off by saying, as a representative of the Claret Group, and probably the only person that would have ever had a conversation with the appellant regarding a negotiation or termination of leases, there was no heated or real discussion besides a couple of casual conversations, and the appellant wasn't really interested in continuing the signs, and there was never a dispute on terminated leases. It benefits the appellant at this point to paint both those things differently. And I want to say, contrary to what you've heard about there being no urgency to the approval, there's a window of opportunity to start a large mixed-use project in the middle of Hollywood. It took 2.5 years of entitlements. It was entitled in 2007. It equates to 2,500 construction jobs, 500 permanent jobs, over 100 affordable housing units of very low-income housing, over 1,000 new rental housing units in the middle of Hollywood, 12,000 square foot of public space, and live-work units, 175,000 square feet of neighborhood serving retail. This project had unprecedented community support and city support, and it's because it was well designed, and it's because it had both community and city input. It has 7 super graphics that are integrated into the architecture, located on a commercial boulevard where signs belong. So I ask you today, as a representative of the Claret Group, a board member of the LA Chamber of Commerce, and a board member of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, that you properly rule before you on what is in front of you today, which is a signage plan for a 1 million square foot project that is well designed and nothing more.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Brown?
Russell Brown. Previous to being downtown, and I'm well known for doing a lot of activities downtown, I lived in Hollywood for 10 years. I was previous chair of Hollywood United Neighborhood Council. I was also chair of the Hollywood United Planning Committee. This project, as I said, not only had unanimous community support, but if you had told me as planning chair that we'd be shepherding through almost 1 million square feet on almost 4 square blocks of the city, have 4 neighborhood councils, Hollywood Hills West, Hollywood United, Central Hollywood, and the Hollywood Studio District, have 5 different community groups all stand in favor of this unanimously, in opposition at the time of the city council person in that district, in opposition to the CRA, because we had been involved with the Claret Group, and Ira Handelman shepherded through a project of almost 3 years of designing every single detail of the project, from the driveways to the signage to the trees to the massing, and worked so closely with them for an integrated design that when we packed the Planning Commission meeting, they had never seen a project that big with that much community support. So that is how involved the community was in the integrated sign and design of this. We're very much in support of Claret and their process, and when the signs were taken down, it was for the impact of the entire neighborhood to come up with a sign reduction plan and then integrate it into a well-designed plan. So I want to congratulate Claret on that process, and this is a great project. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And last but not least, the council office.
Catherine Hennigan on behalf of Council President Garcetti's office. We strongly support the revised sign program. We've directed the Planning Department to clarify the language in the Hollywood Signage Supplemental Use District Ordinance, which they've done. The amendments will be moving forward to Council soon. The revised SUD ordinance addresses requirements in regard to sign placement compliance. The exceptions which the applicant is requesting continue to meet the intent of the supplemental use agreement and will meet the requirements under the revised ordinance. Our office would strongly urge the Plum Committee to deny the appeal and uphold the recommendation of the Planning Department and the Central Area Planning Commission. And to speak very briefly on what's going back and forth, our office strongly feels that both the issues are totally separate, and we've spoken to the City Attorney's Office and they've agreed with us, which I think that statement reiterates. So thank you.
Okay. Councilor?
Let me ask one more question of city attorney's office or planning. Take the worst case scenario, because I'm not convinced on the legal argument about who gets the sign credits at all. Let's take the worst case scenario. Regency has every claim to the sign credits, and the approvals were based on the fact that they already made the mistake, and so I guess it's the Central Area Planning Commission said, okay, we've already given out the credits, so we can't give it twice, so we're going to support the same mistake. So let's assuming all those worst case scenarios, and ultimately it goes to the courts, and the courts decide Regency's in the right, and they get all the credits. How does that impact this project? Is it still completely separate, or does it impact in some way that puts us in a bad position legally?
Craig Weber, planning staff. I actually heard in point number 2 from the city attorney's statement a pretty clear answer to that question.
That will be determined in court. That's what that second statement that I read means. And then whatever the outcome of that is could dictate, a certain conclusion here. And if there's a writ and a writ is issued, it will direct the city to do something, and that will clarify all of those issues. And we just don't know what that is at this time.
But assuming it's the worst case for the city and we're completely reversed, does that put us in the position of having to undo something we've already done because we've approved this project today?
I don't know that would be any different than any other challenge to a city decision where it's either an approval or a disapproval, and the court disagrees. So I'm not sure that this is unique to that situation. But I mean, perhaps there's other issues that could be addressed, or responses that could be addressed when this goes to the full council, and I can go back and relay your questions and see if there's something else that another response, or have someone else at the table.
Well, it may not be different than other similar situations, but if I'm ever in this situation and I think there's a big legal question and we put ourselves in a bad position later, I tend not to vote to move things forward until we resolve that legal question. Right. So if it really would cause us to have to undo something in the development process and cause us greater expense and greater problems, then I wouldn't want to see it go forward. I'd want it resolved first.
And I just want to understand the question, Vince Bertoni, Deputy Director. I think what I'm hearing is that if these issues are truly separate issues, sign credits versus the entitlement requests, so that let's say there's civil litigation, and let's say that Regency is awarded the credits, not Claret, would the city have to go back and change any of its approvals that it'd be issuing as part of this package here? I think is the question. Is there anything in this package is there anything in this package of approvals that is tied to Claret rather than Regency being the owner of the credits?
And that is exactly my question.
Well, Craig Weber, planning staff, as a matter of clarification, the scope of the determination that was made by the Area Planning Commission with regard to this case was a new sign program. And so the matter of credits, regrettably that ship had already sailed. And so if there needs to be some redistribution of who gets what credits, that's already going to need to take place. What the Area Planning Commission decided in this instance related to the arrangement, size, and scale of supergraphics on a new building, and there were specific findings that had to be made. So in a sense, the appeal and the discussion of sign credits is misplaced with regard to the Area Planning Commission's determination on this particular case.
So does this, Vince Bertoni, Deputy Director, so has anything changed in this approval depending upon who owns the credits?
Not to my understanding, no.
I don't know. I don't hear a lot of certainty here, and I'm not that compelled. That's the problem. I mean, the question is, if they lose the credits, does that change this project? If they rule in court they had no business having the credits, suddenly they don't have them, what happens to the project? Do they lose all their super graphics? Does that change other elements of the project as a result?
It's a financial.
The awarding of super graphics is predicated upon the prior issuance of of billboard takedown. So in a sense, if the court were determined that nobody gets the credits, there is no takedown, the takedown was invalid, and all that billboard square footage is erased and null and void, then there would be direct implications. The applicant would need to go find some new signs to take down. The matter of who actually has ownership of the existing credits and to which party that's awarded to, it really is a civil matter. It's not something that I'm really prepared to comment on because it's a civil matter, but my understanding is that it wouldn't have any bearing on the project that's been appealed today.
Councilman Correa, one way to approach this is that you can vote, you can abstain, you can go against or support the appeal. We can make that decision, and this discussion will continue in as much as the councilman would want to open up that discussion to council floor. Since we had the public hearing here, so I'm ready to vote, but I see you're really...
Well, in other words, though, the applicant is going to need, before they can pull a building permit, they're going to need whatever they need, or they're not going to get their permit. So I don't think the issue of ownership of the credits is really an issue today. I mean, I think it's a question of, can you make those findings for the requested entitlements?
So as I hear that, is the worst case scenario, getting back to Councilmember Koretz's question, is let's say there's the two separate issues. There's who owns the credits. There's the entitlement approvals that are before the plum today. If in the worst case scenario for the approval that Claret is not awarded the credits, Regency is awarded the credits, as I'm hearing it, is that there's no change to the approvals that's necessary. It's just that Claret may need to go and purchase other credits somewhere else. That's the worst case scenario. It doesn't change the approvals is what I'm hearing. It just means that Claret would have to go out and purchase credit somewhere else.
So they just wouldn't be able to put up their super graphics until they
purchase the credits.
I think I have to wait till the chair is here. There's not much I can do on my own anyway.
Let's hope you had another question. Okay.
Yeah, we were waiting for you.
All right. Okay. So, did we get that question answered?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one, but based on that last clarification, I'm going to move to deny the appeal.
Okay, I would second that, but I do want to say, and it's appropriate, but I think the corporate spirit from the different sign companies, and some have been much more cooperative than others, and I do appreciate that. But this is a very complicated issue, and the courts are still deciding. We got rulings coming out, and a new city attorney, so it's not as easy as I would want it to be. So it is complicated. So I would second that motion. With the action of this committee. Okay, next item.
Next item, council members, is an appeal by Nendra Jenkins. She's appealing the decision of the East LA APC, which determined that the MMD for the project was inadequate, but however, they approved the parcel map for 2 parcels, single-family development in CD 14.
Before we go to that item, Councilmember, going back to item 11, is that deny the appeal and approve the specific?
I'm sorry, Barbara, one more time.
You're going to deny the appeal, but that means you're approving the exception. I want to make that clear for clarification. You're not only denying the appeal, you're approving the exception, the entitlement.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
All right. You confuse me sometimes, Barbara.
No, actually, I'm trying to make sure we have it on the record.
Okay. You make me uncertain sometimes. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, sir. Last but not least,
committee members.
big drummer for the Northeast here.
Fernando Tovar with the Department of City Planning, and basically I just want to say that staff is available to answer any questions. I think the bottom line here is that the City Council adopted a motion on July 28th to assert its jurisdiction under Prop 245 over the East Area Planning Commission's action on the parcel map, as was read into the record, concerning the Commission's action. And staff is
What was that, council member?
And yeah, the motion was introduced by Councilmember Huizar, who is a member of the committee. Unfortunately, is not available at the moment, but I believe his staff is available. I will say this: depending on the direction that the committee goes on this matter, staff may have some recommendations or suggestions, depending on which way your action goes.
Councilmember Reyes, Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. This is what happened at the Area Planning Commission. This was an appeal of a parcel map, and it was a lengthy meeting. At the conclusion of the meeting, the Area Planning Commission recommended approval of the map, but they denied or disapproved the mitigated negative declaration. They had a lot of concerns about that, and that's a legal inconsistency. If you're going to approve a project, you have to approve the CEQA clearance. If you don't like the CEQA clearance because you think it's not supported by substantial evidence or it's faulty on other grounds, then you can't approve the project. So you had a decision that was inconsistent, and the only way to fix that was to bring it back. But unlike tentative maps, parcel maps don't get the third level of appeal to City Council. So there was a corrected, and the determination was also incorrect. So there was a corrected determination, and Councilmember Huizar brought the matter before the council under 245.
Okay, so since it's been 245, it's really the action of the council member of the district that's before us.
It's the parcel map appeal.
Parcel map appeal
before you. So if you think that the CEQA clearance was faulty, then you disapprove the parcel map. If you disagree and you think that the CEQA clearance was fine, there was an issue of piecemealing and some other things that were and project description. I think the planning commissioner who made the motion said that she had a problem with the project description and something that was not covered and not analyzed. So you can either disapprove the whole thing, you can disagree with the commission's determination on the CEQA clearance and approve the whole thing, but then you have to make the appropriate CEQA findings, or you could continue the matter and
let me do this.
have the appropriate CEQA clearance done and then brought back.
Okay, I like the last one. But let me just, because everyone's been waiting. But I know Councilman Huizar is not here. Is the council deputy ready to speak on this? Okay. So why don't we go through the public hearing cards? Let's hear the discussion. Then ask for any questions that we have for the staff. Madam Attorney, in this case, do I go with the appellants first? Or is there a protocol that I'm supposed to follow here?
It would go back to the same procedural posture it was in at the APC. So I would address probably the appellants first and hear their argument.
So let's do that. And who are the appellants on this case? I believe if I'm reading the cards correctly, we have Mark Penn, who's here for Nora Sinkins. Is that correct?
No, I'm here for Nidra Jenkins. My name is Mark Penn, and I'm speaking on behalf of Nidra Jenkins. She is my better half, and she is currently at the Huntington Memorial Hospital. We just delivered a baby Sunday evening, and both are in intensive care, but the prognosis is good for both. What we're here to discuss is the fact that the East Los Angeles Planning Commission, they actually disapproved of the MND. And when you disapprove of the mitigative negative declaration, then the project is dead, point blank, period. So we're a little confused about why we have actually gone up to this point when the East Planning Commission already made their decision. The project, the MND declaration, has been disapproved and denied. Therefore, the project has been canceled. So we're asking this body to support the appellant, Nidra Jenkins, and also deny and disapprove the development project as the East LA Planning Commission did so. And that's really the bottom line.
Do you recall the reasoning for that action?
The reasoning is because the mitigation negative declaration was not clear in the description, and there were concerns by Commissioner Lowe about the adequacy of the so-called declaration in itself. That project, the proposed project, is actually in our backyard, and it borders our actual property line. We had 23 residences also sign up on that appeal. And the fact of the matter is that neighborhood, every last one of our neighbors in that area disapprove of that project in itself. One thing I do want to bring up, not necessarily sure whether or not this is the appropriate venue to bring this up. When the initial decision was made May 27th of 2009, at no time was the appellant, Nidra Jenkins, or any of the residences notified of, number one, the meeting that took place on May 27th. Therefore, we were not even aware of it. We were only made aware of the June 10th meeting which took place, which the City Planning Department made some comments associated with it. From our perspective, once we did find out what the ruling was, as far as we were concerned, the East Planning Commission already made its decision. They denied, and they forcefully denied, the mitigation negative declaration. And that is also identified in the current recent ruling of the latter part of June.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
That is our position.
Thank you very much. Anybody else here on behalf of the appellants? That's it? Okay, then we'll go through the cards. Next would be... let's hear from the owner. Who's the owner here? Let's come on up. Or the representative, whatever makes you comfortable.
Okay, I'll go.
And your name, please, name and address.
Good afternoon, Councilman. Thanks for hearing the case today. I know this is the last one, so I'll try to get through it pretty quick. My name is Jimmy Lee, Land Design Consultants, representing our applicant of the project. And today we are ultimately seeking your approval on this project, both the parcel map and the mitigated neg deck issued associated with the parcel map. I'm not sure what the confusions are. As presented before you, the project was, filed by the applicant by right in accordance with Subdivision Map Act and in compliance with all city codes, ordinance, and it was eventually approved by the advisory agency for the two parcel subdivision. And throughout the process, I believe during the advisory agency, the MND also was approved. But apparently there was an appeal on the MND was not suffice. I believe, if I could recall correctly, it was based on sensitive species issue on the property and wildlife corridor and some grading, but throughout the tentative process, all those issues were addressed. And as you can see in the photograph that I submitted to you, the area is, it's a fairly heavily urbanized area surrounded by homes, existing homes. And then, as you can see in the middle, there's now a lot of vegetation on site besides some of the trees surrounding the parcel. Also on the smaller exhibit.
If I may ask you, where on Bend Drive is your lot? Is it near Jessica Drive or is that the other
It's
end?
at the end of Bend Drive. So if you go up Bend Drive, that vacant parcel in the middle, that's the property. And then if you look at the small exhibit, you can see a light orange square roof at the end of Bend Drive.
Yeah.
That house was recently, or I believe last year, that was constructed. Adjacent to our owner's property. So I believe the M&D issues were, like I said, sensitive animals based on like condors, kangaroo rats, coyotes, spotted owls in the area, which, looking at the pictures compared to the urbanized area, that's highly unlikely. And discussing with the staff, I believe they, did all the research, all the means.
Can you conclude? Can you finish?
So ultimately, we feel that M&D has addressed everything appropriately, addressing all the issues, and throughout the whole tentative process, we have addressed all the concerns raised by,
Thank you, sir.
by the residents.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you.
Okay, next will be Amber Lau. Good afternoon. Is your name and address, please?
My name is Amber Lau. I am the owner of 4497 Bend Drive. Thank you, Council. My husband and I own this rather large lot, and together we are intending to develop it into to split it in two lots, which we could make it actually downsize the size, because right now it's large, and we're trying to make it conformable in size and use because it is a residential area. The property is actually, it's cornered into an area butted between residences, and we're trying to make the best of it. Apparently, right now, we're acknowledging that the neighbors have needs and concerns, and we have been presented with conditions and approvals based on if we're willing to accept those conditions, and we are. We've done all that we could. We're willing to do whatever is necessary to make the neighbors comfortable. We have invested a lot of time and effort and energy in studying and researching to make the least impact and design something that would be most comfortable to ourselves and the area. We have no intention of harming an endangered species because there's none on the property. We first had an approval for this case at hand, and it's been reviewed twice, and it's been approved twice. Now we're sitting here trying to figure out, why has it been rejected with the conditions and the approvals that were presented earlier. All that we want to do is be able to make this property usable for our family, and it's an extremely large lot, and I'm just kindly requesting you to reconsider this.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, we have with us Sharon Lowe and Mark Kenyon.
Good afternoon, council members. I apologize for causing this problem. This is my error in my making the motion.
As she smiles.
As I smile.
Okay.
As the former vice chair of the East LA APC and recently former, I made an error in making the motion after an hour and 16 minutes. However, I think if you listen to the entire record of that APC hearing, our frustrations Neither appellant nor applicant were present. Very unusual. Notice issues have been an ongoing issue before our APC. So what you have is a deliberation that took place with a lot of frustrations. When I made the motion, I specifically stated, and after listening again to the audio twice, I said, having said all that, after going through modifications to conditions, which I usually do, I do make modifications conditions. In the event that a motion that I make does not get adopted, then I come up with an alternative motion. In this instance, we had major concerns with the mitigated negative deck. And the reason for that is that what was before us is a parcel map for 2 lots with 2 single-family developments and a private street. However, the project description in the MND did not address that. So we didn't know if the mitigated negative deck actually adequately analyzed the whole project. The frustration that the APC has consistently had to contend with is we get one aspect for discretionary review. We were told that the haul route was not before us yet, had not yet been applied for. In past, we've requested, in the event it is applied for, that analysis also be incorporated within the MND analysis as that part of the whole project. In addition, a private street. In addition, this is within the Mount Washington Glasgow Park specific plan. So we asked, but again, we were told that whether or not a project permit compliance application had been made, no one could respond to that. But that was not before us. This is the problem we face in frustration, is we only get a part of the project, yet we go through several different aspects of discretionary review depending on when the applicant applies for it. But CEQA requires that the project be viewed as a whole, not piecemealed. And that was the concern. In addition, there were errors in the MND.
Errors in the what?
In the mitigated negative declaration. In the environmental setting description, not project description, there was a reference to over 4,000 cubic yards of excavation and grading that would be involved. Yet the MND within the checklist in a certain section only identified 900 cubic yards, plus cubic yards, under the 1,000 cubic yards threshold. So we don't know if it was fully analyzed. That's one aspect. We don't know, but clearly what was before us was a parcel map that included an anticipation of a private street, a hammerhead turnout, and then another issue that came before us at the hearing was that an easement, private easement access easement would have to be required and attained by the applicant. When you go to Bend Avenue site, you come to a dead-end street. When you look at it, you see a clearing site, and when I went out there, I thought it all belonged to the applicant. After going through the documents, clearly a private easement is required over an adjoining property. That, and council member, you know this because I know in Council District 1 we've had to face several issues in terms of private streets that were inadequately built and not knowing what's underneath that lot, what's on an adjacent lot that the applicant has no control over. So we didn't want to put the cart before the horse. We didn't want to fester further partial development or to burden the community. So we found that the project description was inadequate in MND, and I know I did state, after much ado, to grant the appeal in part, and that's where the error was. I shouldn't have said in part. I should have just said to grant the appeal and find that the mitigated negative declaration is inadequate as to the project description, and that would have ended it.
Okay, so that really was the intended action.
That was my intended action, and I'm
Okay.
glad that the council member brought this forward and asserted jurisdiction to reach that clarification, because
Okay.
that was the intent because of our frustrations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll ask about the frustrations later, but let's finish the public hearing. Mark Kenyon, and that'll be the last card. On the last item,
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mark Kenyon. I'm here representing the Mount Washington Homeowners Alliance. We're a group of over 650 members that are active in land use issues within Mount Washington Glassell Park area. I personally spoke at the East Area Planning Commission that this issue came up, and was able to, having read the MND prior, I was able to actually testify on some of the issues that our organization, as well as some of the neighbors that we had talked to prior to the meeting, also had. So we would support the original East Area Planning Commission that the MND is inadequate. We, my own reading of the record, it's quite clear that Commissioner Lowe and the other commissioners realized that by denying the MND, that the other discretionary decisions, as is required by state law, were at that point nullified. Just to get on record with respect to the concerns within the MND and its inadequacy, this condition of whether or not the full amount of grading was in fact studied properly, because there are at least two different places where they reference some 4,500 cubic yards, and another area only 900 some odd cubic yards. So whether or not the grading impacts, in particular the air quality and traffic, have been adequately mitigated is unknown at this point. The cumulative impacts on the plant community, and while this particular lot is somewhat degraded, it sits within a larger California black walnut woodland, and the cumulative impacts both on this property as well as surrounding properties should be adequately discussed within the CEQA document. In particular, with regard to the brush clearance that would have taken place on this lot, and we don't think that the MND addresses that issue at all. The land use impacts, the properties within the Mount Washington Glassell Park specific plan area, that specific plan has certain unique requirements and findings that are required. The MND does not address those. And then finally, one that came up from that came up at the hearing that no one could answer were the impacts from what was either a previous house that no one seems to know that may have been on this lot at some point in the past, or some sort of infill materials that were brought onto this property that may contain asbestos, and that issue had not been adequately addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kenyon. I have a question for you, Mr. Kenyon. We heard from the owner, Ms. Lau, that they want to cooperate, they want to work with the community, and they want to understand how to get this done. Was there ever a time in which the folks who have concerns, like the neighbors, ever spoke with the applicant? Ms. Lau and her party?
No, not to my knowledge. Neither the applicant didn't contact our organization. Certainly, we have monthly land use meetings, and of course have a website, and are known by both neighbors and developers in our area as an organization to come present to have us look over their projects prior. So from our point of view, no one contacted us.
So this came on the radar and everyone responded.
Correct. One of the neighbors, neither Nedra Jenkins nor Mark Penn, actually contacted the Homeowners Alliance. It was one of their other neighbors that contacted us.
I understand, Mr. Kenyon, but rarely do I hear the person trying to build to say, I want to do what people...
Right.
We want to fit in other words.
Yeah, absolutely.
I already hear that, so when I heard it today from Ms. Lau, I was just curious to see, okay, was there that level of interaction with them so that they could develop their land based on their rights without imposition on the local neighborhood, and I think that's what they're seeking, but that's what we're doing right now.
As a representative of the Homeowners Alliance, we would absolutely welcome that. We meet often with developers of properties prior to their seeking discretionary decisions.
Okay. Tara Devine from Councilmember Waysar's office.
Hello, Tara Devine, Council District 14. To start, with regards to your last question, the developer of this particular project did not contact our office either with regards to this application. Had he done so, we would have certainly referred him to the appropriate community groups in the area.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
To be clear, this is a little bit of an unusual Section 245 for a council office. Typically, the council office asserts jurisdiction when they're not happy with the outcome of a case. This is more nuanced for us. We don't actually have any issue with the decision that was made by East Area Planning Commission and their findings that the MND was inadequate. We simply have a procedural impasse with the fact that the parcel map was approved and the MND was denied. So specifically, we ask you today to simply correct that matter, and we support the East Area Planning Commission decision as they rendered it.
So ultimately, our action, as you recommended, would be to support, which would be to deny?
We would ask that you do what we believe the East LA Area Planning Commission intended to do, which is to grant the appeal as a whole, as opposed to in part.
Okay. Okay, so...
Grant the appeal, you have to take an action on the parcel map, too. That means you have to either deny or disapprove the parcel map.
Okay, I was going to get there, Barbara. Just give me a chance here.
No, I just want to
Give me a chance, Barbara. Come on.
I'm tired.
This is the last one. Let me go through this and see if it's correct. Grant the appeal filed by Neighbor Jenkins and then by overturn the decision of the East Los Angeles Planning Commission determined the mitigated negative declaration is inadequate and approving preliminary parcel map number 2007-5858-980 PMLA PS-1A for the construction, use, and maintenance of two parcel single-family development with a private street located at 448 7-449 East Bend Drive, subject to modified conditions number 18 and added conditions numbers 12, 19, CM-18, and CM-19. Yes? No?
I want to make sure that did you say sustain the decision on the parcel map?
Grant the appeal.
Okay, grant the appeal, but you don't want to sustain the decision of the commission. That's the commission.
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. I thought I heard you say, council member, that you wanted to sustain the decision of the commission on the parcel map.
No, I did not say that.
Okay.
That's what I thought.
So your motion, are you?
It's just grant the appeal filed by...
In whole, and then disapprove the parcel map based on the inadequacy of the mitigated negative declaration.
Thank you.
Right, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's it.
That's the motion, I'll second it.
That's the ticket. Okay. All right, so that's first, second, that's the actions committee. And anybody have public comment? Well, before I finish that, let me ask this. How did we get here? I mean, you had, can you get the planning stuff up here? Because I'm a little concerned about what I'm hearing. I'm hearing the area planning commissioners say that they're getting incomplete information to review and make decisions. How does that happen?
I can only speak to you about the deficiencies, if anything, in this particular M&D.
That's what I want.
Yeah. Okay. Let me get it in front of me.
I know it's late, but I think these are lessons learned, and what's going to change in the process that prevents this from happening again?
Right. The project description, there was two issues. One is the hearing notice that was mailed to the 500-foot radius. And on that notice, the project description described a existing dwelling on the site is actually vacant. It's over 50,000 square feet, and it described a proposed parcel map to create two lots with an existing single-family dwelling on one lot and a proposed dwelling on the second lot to be created. With respect, that was not a part of the project description in the M&D.
Why?
We're just talking about the hearing notice. And the environmental project description basically described approval of a preliminary parcel map to allow for a lot split of one lot into two lots, with lot A having 21,000 square feet and lot B having 28,000 square feet. I believe that misdescribes the actual the actual size of the lots, but I don't remember by how much they may be off. But at the end of the day, it's a two-lot subdivision. With respect to...
I mean, what I'm asking you is there an oversight on the planning staff? You guys didn't see this
particular
correctly, or
M&D,
what happened?
There's a new policy that I believe that is requiring that all M&Ds are now being processed by the community planning section, at least those that are within Northeast LA. And this, I suspect, was one of the first ones, and I think they're going through their learning curve. So in terms of making some editorial errors as possible.
Vince, can you speak to this?
But beyond that, yeah.
I don't know the details of this case, to be honest with you, Councilmember Reyes. What we can do is we can take a look into it, and we can get back to you on this to
Can
find
you
out
do
the
that?
specifics.
I'd really like to understand, okay, why do we have the commissioners as volunteers going through this, and they spend a lot of time, you've got applicants who are going through these experiences, and we should live and learn in terms of, okay, what worked, what didn't. So I'd appreciate that, not to put you on the spot right now, Mr. Tovar, but I'd like to know why this is happening and what are we going to do to clean this up. Okay, thanks, Dora. I'm sorry, the action's been taken. We can talk afterwards. We'll speak to the appellant too afterwards. I'm sorry I couldn't get you to come back, but I just wanted to finish this. But okay, seeing no one else for public comment, this meeting's adjourned.